6 o'clock, call this meeting of the Chelmsford School Committee to order. We all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. This meeting is being live streamed by Chelmsford Telemedia and posted to the CPS website for interested community members to access and watch. In-person public participation will be taking place tonight in accordance with social distancing and safety protocols established by the Chelmsford School Committee Public Participation Guidelines. Anyone interested in speaking during the public input portion of the meeting who had notified the superintendent's office by yesterday afternoon have been provided with these guidelines and assigned a time to attend the meeting to speak. If anyone watching this meeting live has questions or comments to share, they're encouraged to email one of us during the meeting, and we'll read their questions or comments during our second public input session at the end of the meeting. Okay, so welcome to this meeting of the Chelmsford School Committee. First item on our agenda is approval of our minutes from our meetings on October 5th and October 14th.
I move that the school committee approve the minutes of the regular school committee meeting of October 5th, 2021.
Second. Okay, anybody have any corrections on those? Okay, all in favor of approval? Aye. Abstaining?
Abstain.
Okay, one. Okay, we now need a motion on our workshop on October 14th.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of the school committee workshop meeting on October 14th, 2021.
Second? Thanks. I thought you were busy.
No, you do it. No, you do
Okay, so we have 2 seconds. Okay, any comments or questions? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Great. Okay, next up, our student representative, Sarah.
Great, thank you. So in a few weeks, the academic term will be wrapping up on November 5th, so students and teachers are working hard to close out this term successfully. As a follow-up from one of our updates from the last meeting regarding the College and Career Readiness Center, we've been seeing a lot of representatives from colleges coming to speak with students about their plans for the next 4 years. Along those lines, guidance counselors are continuing to have their meetings with the class of 2022 so that everybody has a plan for whatever their future might hold as the first major deadline approaches on November 1st. This week is Spirit Week, so the Student Council has been organizing Spirit Days leading up to Pep Rally, which will be held outside this Friday. Everyone is showing their school spirit and engaging in friendly competition between classes to see who can have the most participation. This weekend, there are a few different events happening. Saturday morning, there's a student-organized walk to support Nick Spironis, a CHS junior and a member of the football and wrestling team in his battle against cancer. They are expecting a large student turnout at this event, and we are all wishing Nick the best. Later that night is the senior Halloween dance at the Elks, organized by our class reps. Many students are very excited for this event. And finally, next Sunday, the 31st, is Halloween. So Lime, or Leadership in Motion Everywhere, is organizing their second annual drive-through trick-or-treat. Most clubs and activities are participating by setting up their own table with different themes, and we're expecting a lot of kids from the community to come. And the proceeds go to the Paul Center, which is a great cause and a really good way for CHS students to be giving back to the community. And that's all for updates.
Thank you very much. All right, anyone have any good news?
Okay, so a couple of things. Parker Middle School is in a little bit of a competition right now. So they have been voted for the Boston 25 My School Rules competition. They're up against, is it, John, was it Weymouth?
Weymouth.
Yeah, Weymouth Middle School. And they will receive a grant for $5,000 if they are to win this My School Rules competition. So we are asking everyone, starting tomorrow, they're going to air the segment. So it's already been taped at the school. They're going to air the segment at 7:30 a.m. and then again at 7:20 and 9:20 a.m. And then you have up until the 21st at 11:59 to vote for the Parker Middle School. So we're asking everyone to go onto Channel 25, onto their website, and give a vote to the Parker Middle School so that their school can rule and win some money to do some great things. In other good news, we've had wonderful events that have been happening. We saw Dawn and Newcomb at the Boo Bash. We had a good time at the Boo Bash at the Byham Elementary School. And as you know, there's some upcoming events for our other elementary schools, for Center, and also for Parker, a combined Parker and Harrington PTO Battle of the Boos. So all sorts of fun things that are happening in our school district. And today we had professional development, which lots of, online, in person, many things happening. So we're, well on our way of continuing with good things that are happening in the district.
Anybody else have any good news?
I just wanted to comment on one thing that Sarah mentioned. I'm so glad that you guys are doing the Halloween event at the high school again for the community. I thought last year, it was absolutely incredible to see the number of people who brought their children and drove by, and the spirit that the high school showed to the community. So happy to see that happening again. And enjoy this week and the Spirit Week and Pep Rally and all of those things. It's terrific.
Okay, anybody else? I just wanted to pass on a congratulations, actually, to a fellow school committee member from Chelmsford, Don Ayer, who serves on the Neshoba Tech School Committee. He recently received recognition from the MASC, the Mass Association of School Committees, with his Lifetime Achievement Award. So he's been involved with Neshoba and with technical education for 40 years now, so well-deserved recognition from Dawn. And I'd be remiss if I didn't congratulate Donna Newcomb today on her unified basketball win. Coaches for Lowell.
You know what, I do want to say, if anybody has a chance to attend one of Chelmsford's unified basketball games, I think it would be well worth it. It's really inspiring to see the partners and the athletes, working together on the court, playing other cities or towns. So I would highly recommend it if you need a little boost and a smile on your face.
All right, anybody else? Okay, so we're now to our first public input part of our meeting, but I don't believe we have any registered speakers.
We don't have any, no.
Okay, so we'll move on to new business.
Great, thank you. We'll jump right in tonight, and I'm going to introduce Jessica Nolet, our World Languages Coordinator, and she has a couple of our staff members here for the year, so I have a tendency to say sometimes too much, and I take away the comments from the presenter, so I'm going to stop at this point and just invite Jessica to talk a little bit about our guest tonight and some of the work that you're doing in the World Language Department.
Sure, no problem. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you for having me again. It's great to see you all in person. I think the last time I saw you was remotely, so this is much better. So I'm here today with two of our visiting teachers from Spain, Carlos Martin Caracedo and Leire Perez Quiroz. So they are experienced teachers in Spain. They teach English normally, and we have hired them through a program with the Ministry of Education in Spain and the Department of Education here in Massachusetts. And they come over, experienced teachers in Spain apply, they go through the same interview process that any other candidate would go to for a job across the United States. And we are very lucky to have them here teaching Spanish at Chelmsford High School this year. So they can be here for up to 3 years. We hope they'll stay because they're fantastic. And we're really excited about this opportunity to see, learn from them and their experience. They're learning so much about the public education system in Massachusetts. It's a huge step to completely move countries in the middle of a pandemic, no less, and start a brand new job and learn a whole new school system. So they have learned a lot. They moved here in August, but we're really excited to have them. So do you want to say a few words about where you're from in Spain and what you teach?
I'm from the Canary Islands, which are 7 islands very close to Africa. Maybe you have seen on the news that there is a volcano going on right now.
Yes.
Well, I come from that place specifically. And yeah, I've been teaching for 6 years in Spain, back in Spain. I've been teaching English, as you said. I've been teaching English for adults, for teenagers, all kind of ages. And this is my 7th year as a teacher, and I decided to try this opportunity and come over and teach Spanish, teach my culture in this beautiful place, and I'm really enjoying it. And yeah, that's...
Thank you.
Okay, now my turn. Well, my name is Leire, my last name Perez, and I come from a little town next to Madrid. It belongs to the province of Toledo. It's a very touristic place, but I live in a small town that belongs to Toledo. And I've been teaching there for 12 years now. And yes, I have a lot of experience teaching, but it's just teaching English. And then I had this great opportunity to apply for a school year working here, which I thought that was like a challenge for me. It was really a challenge, and I wanted to try because I like getting to know other places and other educational systems, other ways, other ideas from other people. And I think this is being already a really a great experience so far, and I think I will learn. There is a lot of things to learn yet, so I'm enjoying it, and yes, and also try to make students to get in contact with my students or my former students in Spain, which I think is a really nice opportunity for both kids from both countries to get to know the real thing and get to know people from other countries. And that's all.
Thank you.
Great, well, thank you for coming here tonight and let us know.
Thank you.
what
Thank
you're
you.
doing.
Yeah, thank you very much. We're excited about having you. And thank you for coming tonight and introducing yourselves.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, enjoy.
Pleasure.
Enjoy.
Thank you so much.
Hope.
All right. Second item this evening is just an update on some of our pool testing, test and stay, and student vaccination status. So let me pull that up real quick. All right. So, as you know, I've been doing this every couple of weeks for us, just updating our data. So we're always looking at like a 2-week time period at a time. So this is all data as of last Thursday. So this is published to the Mass Department of Public Health website, and I pull that information from there. So we haven't had too much of a change in our overall vaccination data as far as the town is concerned, or when we get into the schools, we'll see that either. We're still staying at about, well, actually, we've had a little bit of growth with the 12 to 15-year-olds. We're just shy of 80% now townwide with those individuals receiving at least one dose of the vaccine. So obviously, there are some individuals that need to go and get the second dose. That's at about 68%. And of our kind of more of a high school population, our 16 to 19-year-olds, we've got a good positivity rate there of 87% receiving their first dose and 83% fully vaccinated at this time. Now, at this time, that just takes into consideration the 2 shots. I honestly don't know, eventually someone asked me this, how it's going to factor in when people go to get, say, the 3rd booster shot. I really don't know how that's going to factor into the data. I think right now, people are considered fully vaccinated if you've received the 1 Johnson & Johnson or the 2 doses of the Pfizer Moderna. So I believe that's how the data is going to stay. But if I hear anything different, I'll obviously let you know. But this is our town-wide vaccination data so far for our students. Pool testing and test and stay, you'll actually see those numbers going up a little bit as far as our participation rates are concerned. And again, I think this happens more with the test and stay protocol. When we do have a positive case within the district, people who haven't signed up yet for test and stay, typically that next day go on because they want to be able to have their children be able to stay in school. So you will see our test and stay numbers going up a little bit. In our pool testing, again, each week we're probably adding 100 to 150 participants in pool testing. So those numbers are pretty strong. The nice takeaway is that really you can sign up at any time to participate in pool testing or the test and stay program. There's just sometimes a lag when you actually do sign up. It takes a few days to be able to get in the system to then be able to participate. So as I've said from the beginning, if you ever want to be able to stay in school, if your child is identified as a close contact, you're much better off to pre-approving or going in and pre-signing up for the test and stay option. Even if you decide not to take it after the fact, that's totally up to you. But typically that first time your child's identified as a close contact, if they haven't already consented and filled out the paperwork, the child does have to be excluded for that first window. So I highly recommend going in and at least testing and providing the consent to test and stay. Again, we're seeing some pretty good numbers. Unfortunately, sometimes those numbers go up after we've had a positive case and people, it's a reaction as opposed to being proactive. But the more we can get people to sign up ahead of time, the better. So those numbers are fairly strong. We now have our 3rd week of COVID pool data. So this again is a weekly test. It's just I updated you 2 weeks ago and we only had 1 week in there. So in the first week, we had 1 positive case. In the second week, we had 2. And then this past week, with all of our action, we had 1 positive pool come back, 1 pool come back positive. So there was 1 individual identified in that pool that was positive. So we performed over 3,300 tests at this point in time, and we have had 4 positives, which I think actually, again, I'm very happy that we were able to capture those 4 positive cases and be able to isolate and deal with them so that we don't see spread within our schools. So we're able to do that. And again, we're not seeing high positivity rates on these tests. The vast majority are coming back negative, but it's still well worth the effort and the time that goes into doing that.
On this pool testing results here, so we've had one person in week 3.
Correct.
As a result of that, there were, of course, identified close contacts, right? Okay. Do we have any data at all that would show from those close contacts if any of those individuals tested positive?
Anecdotally, I can tell you that that has not been the case, because obviously that would also trigger our reporting
Exactly.
window. So some of the students, if you're identified as a close contact, say of that one case this last week, you'd have close contacts that would either have to test and stay, or they would have to go home and isolate. I don't have off the top of my head data to say no one or one ended up testing positive. I can tell you just, again, anecdotally, from that one particular case last week, no one else has come positive, just because I know where it was, and I know that there was no other activity at that particular location. But I think what we would see it is in the subsequent weeks, posting of the regular district-wide data, if that were to happen. As we look at this, and case by case, we actually review with Peggy, and Peggy's in contact with the Board of Health. We're not seeing spread within our school community, which is positive. Again, even of these 4 cases, I can say this, I guess, because it's still confidential, the 2 cases in the second week, ironically, were within the same family. It was just 2 pools that tested positive with 2 family members within different pools. But when we ran the follow-up test, it ended up being the same family. So that would kind of make sense. And again, that actually goes to what we're seeing is more of our positive cases are familial cases within the district. It's not spread within the schools, but a lot of times, particularly with our younger students, parents in the home are having to test for work. And if they have a test for work that comes up positive, then they're having their whole family be tested. And that's how we might actually find out about a child in the family testing positive. Now, obviously, these 4 tests here were conducted during our pool testing. But on the regular dashboard that we report all of the positive cases in the district, the majority are, again, familial. It's coming from a known contact within the family who was positive, so we're not really surprised then that a child within the family is coming back positive. But again, I can tell you we're not seeing spread within the cases, even in that case or in the pool testing cases. But I can ask Peggy, the nurses are working very hard doing all this,
Absolutely.
and I just don't know what additional level of data they may have that we could provide to show that for you. But I'll keep that in mind as we talk through these different cases.
Because I would think that that's how we, the close contacts really are. Is there spread or isn't there spread
Correct.
within the schools? So if there is some data point that you can add to this that shows that, what the transmission is among close contacts, once we've identified them, I think then you've got a pretty complete set of reporting data here.
Right.
If you can do that. Thank you, I appreciate that, if you are able to find it.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Next slide just kind of shows you some of our school-level vaccination data again. A couple of percentage points up, but nothing significant change-wise. And again, this is all self-reporting. So these are all actual vaccination cards that our students, say, at the high school have shared with us. We're not going into the database to kind of mine this information on our own. This is all self-shared information at this time. But about 65% of our high school student population is vaccinated. And then again, we've been saying that we would expect our middle school populations to be less because only half of the school right now can be vaccinated. We're obviously watching to see when that's going to change, but I'm not surprised where those numbers are lower because, again, you don't have the population being eligible. We're going to keep, like we said, pushing that. There is discussion about having additional vaccination clinics in the schools to just make it more readily available to our parents and a little bit easier for them. And we will have some discussions also, once the vaccine becomes available for the younger population, the 5 to 11-year-olds, to see if it makes sense to try to have some clinics in the school or to, try to work with doctors' offices to see what we can do on that front. We're not quite there yet because the authorization hasn't come, but we're obviously looking and willing to work with our families to get their children vaccinated when they can. And then lastly, we've again good feedback on the weekly dashboards that we produce. This just happens to be last week's. I know the numbers are a little small, but I'm looking at the bottom. You can see last week for the whole period, we had one case at the high school of a student. We had 2 at Parker. We had 1 at Byam and 1 at Center. So our numbers have actually gone down pretty significantly since the start of the school year. We had a little blip that first week or 2 of school, but we have leveled out pretty significantly. And again, this is all actual data based on actual cases that we've confirmed and vetted through our school nurses and the Board of Health. But we'll keep updating that on a weekly basis. And like I said, we put it in the newsletter, and we have gotten good feedback from community members who are interested in seeing that data, that they appreciate it. So that's something that we keep doing.
Any questions anybody have on any of this? All right, now, I've been trying to keep this kind of as an agenda item since the beginning of the school year. Would anybody be opposed maybe doing it once a month? Because we're not having a big change in numbers. I mean, obviously, if something,
Or if there's like a positive,
what's that?
or if there's something extraordinary.
Right. If all of a sudden we had a big jump in numbers and stuff, definitely would want to have a report, go to maybe every other week, every other meeting in terms of report. Anybody?
If you want.
Every other meeting, I think, is fine.
Yeah, okay.
I could probably just keep it as a standing item on the second meeting of every month, just for consistency's sake. Obviously, we're always going to be reporting the district-wide COVID data on the dashboard. We're going to have the weekly pool testing still to the website, so people can look at that. I think the only thing we'd ever see fluctuation at is the vaccination and people participating in test and stay at pool testing. But you've seen over the last couple of weeks, it hasn't really jumped significantly. If something ever did, I could always put a special report on for you. But if not, why don't we just plan on the second meeting of every month? I'll provide you with updated figures.
That seem reasonable? Okay. All right.
All right, thank you very much. Third item this evening, I'm going to actually ask Joanna to just kind of review with you a little update on our student transportation now that we're into the full swing of the school year. Joanna has some numbers to share with you, and then transportation is one area that's been having some pretty consistent lingering problems from the beginning of the school year. So we'll just have a couple of comments on that at the end after Joanna shares her overview.
Thank you. We have 3,289 riders on the big yellow buses this year. Normally we have 3,400, so I think we're there. We had our little spike at the end of August and early September for people registering, and now that's kind of calmed down, and there's only been about 70 more people who've registered since the start of school as families are making their decision if they're going to ride the bus or not. We have 29 buses, and remember they make multiple runs. They do the high school, then the middle schools, and the elementary. And the second chart below shows the number of students per school who have registered to ride the bus. And then that's just an average, anywhere between, 30 and, the highest is 53 students on average on a bus. So well below the capacity, which is, between 78 and 83, depending on the size of the bus. And then just a reminder about the fee structure. I just put it on here to remind those families. If it's K to 6, over 2 miles, you're free. Any questions on just general rider information?
It's really interesting on the numbers. For CHS, you have 621 students over 24 buses, and in McCarthy, 679 students over 16 buses. So clearly, the middle schools get a lot more use from the buses than the high school does, a lot more drivers at the high school. But the numbers still are okay with 16 buses. That's because they go to smaller number of locations, is that what it is? For
And
a middle
just-
school versus the high school?
And then there's just less, there's only 800 students per middle school,
Okay,
The issue at the high school, the numbers of individuals on the buses is incredibly low.
right,
So we basically back into the number of buses we need each year based on the elementary. So we have determined previously that we needed about 29 buses to be able to operate the elementary school runs efficiently. And by default, then you have 29 buses to use for the middle school. You're paying for it anyway. So we have, 24 buses that we're using for the high school. It's far more runs or more vehicles than we really need to use it, but we're already paying for the service, so we just have smaller condensed
so you
routes.
use them.
What's helpful at the high school is, when you do, and we're gonna talk about driver shortage in a second, when you do have buses that are out, you can consolidate some of the runs. It's more difficult to do at the middle and the elementary school because the buses have their capacity, they're at more capacity. But that's the only reason. We really wouldn't need 24 buses for the high school if you were just truly doing it based on the ridership. But we do that because we have the available buses anyway.
Thank you.
All right. The other issue, not to belabor this, but the other issue to consider at the high school is their drawing from the whole town. So we
Right.
technically have buses coming in from everywhere as opposed to
Yeah.
like the elementary, the middle schools have more of like a zone that they're transporting in because it's a fixed neighborhood for their schools.
Yeah.
So just to make the runs more shorter and more efficient, we do that for the high school.
I have to tell you that since joining school committee, my respect for anyone who creates these routes and does this stuff has gone up to a highly elevated level. So congratulations on getting it to this point. And every time Joanna is going to give the report, I look at it and say, wow, it's a small report, but it encompasses a lot.
Yeah.
And-
There's a lot that goes into like the operational aspects of the school system. Whether it's the transportation, the food services, all of the ancillary supports to keep us going on a day-to-day basis. There's a lot involved.
Yeah.
But Joanna's office and Peter, our transportation coordinator, do a very nice job. There's a significant number of students that we're transporting, and we certainly have errors, and we have room to improve. But, we're transporting, 3,400 students or so each day to and from school. It's a major undertaking.
It's amazing, yeah.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Now, maybe this is a question for Jay.
Yeah.
With now our ridership being more normal, is that helping a little bit at the drop-off, pickup, whole situation at the schools? I know last year was a little crazy because so many people were driving there.
Yeah, so with regard to like the traffic flow at the schools, it's certainly easier for us to have the buses be utilized because you don't have as much parent traffic, particularly again at the elementary and the middle school level. If you have less parent traffic, it's easier to run the day. So that is a positive. So I think we're back up to basically where we're gonna be. I think these numbers represent that. What we are still significantly struggling with is we do not have enough bus drivers. There's not enough drivers to man our 29 routes. So we've been struggling with this since, and it's really our contractor's struggle, but it becomes our struggle because it's our students being transported since the start of the school year. So they have been down because of the driver shortage, a number of buses, which has then made us have to double up runs, which you can kind of manage if you know ahead of time. Not that it's ideal, but you can manage it a little bit ahead of time. But now that is being compounded, so they have not been able to hire replacement drivers, and it's being compounded by just regular sickness on the buses. So on any given day, if we already know we're gonna be down, 3 to 5 buses, and then 2 or 3 bus drivers end up being sick and can't run their routes, and this is early in the morning when this all happens, it has a compounding effect through the day, and it's been very, very disruptive. So, did you have anything to say on that, or?
I can talk about, how we're combining runs and how we're trying to make
Yeah.
it more efficient. So we're looking at, normally if you have to, let's say your drivers are sick, so you combine your routes. You do that morning and you do it as thoughtfully as you can, depending on who's sick and where it makes sense to combine. We're looking at, should we temporarily just combine the routes? So it's well-known, these routes are combined for a month, and until the bus company can get through this process of hiring more people, getting them trained, getting over their shortage, and then it will help us with predicting the times a little better, because it is going to be a longer ride when you're combining some routes. And then it'll help the driver or the substitute driver or whoever can help out and drive this combined route. So that's what we're looking at this week, to just have a little more predictability of, we know we're not going to meet 29 every day. So what's the next best thing to do to manage through this until we can hire, or the bus company can hire more drivers and get them trained and get them supporting our students?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're comfortable running the numbers at this point because we've got our full registration. I don't think there's going to be kids coming out of the woodwork now to sign up, so we kind of know the captive audience that we need to transport to and from school. We're trying to figure out if we should just kind of cut our losses because we know that they're not going to have 29 drivers. And if they still have 4 permanent openings that they haven't been able to fill since the start of the school year, if we then only have 25 buses available to us, what kind of an impact would that have on the runs? Would we have capacity on the 25 buses, even if we have to reroute some runs to do that? Would the runs not be excessively long? We try not to have our runs be more than, say, 20 minutes to half an hour. How much further out would they have to go? So we're looking at some other alternatives because there just does not seem to be any end in sight to being able to hire additional drivers. And it's very difficult on a day-to-day basis, again, managing just your regular absenteeism from sickness to compounding it by knowing you're already starting out the day short. So we're trying to see what kind of capacity we would have just on our 25 buses to be able to do that. Because I do think in fairness to families, we need to communicate with them what our plan is going to be. Because on a day-to-day basis, a bus is coming, it's a different bus. It's becoming very unsettling to the families, and I totally get it. I was hoping really at the start of the school year, sometimes there's a little bit of a couple of weeks till it gets things to kind of shake out and work out the kinks. This is taking much longer. We're now beyond Columbus Day. Usually, we're smooth sailing by that point in time. So we're taking a look to see if there are steps that we can take to just consolidate some of these runs, cut down the number of buses we're actually using on a day-to-day basis, and then what it will do for families as far as space on buses and time. But we need to communicate something soon, just to let parents know.
Questions?
So in terms of the number of people available for bus drivers, I would think that this is going to have a more longer-term impact on contracts for driving and bus drivers and for school buses in the future. Does the company say anything? Do they have any input on what they're trying to do to get more? Is there any relief into the future that they can see?
They will say different things that they're trying to do to attract drivers. I don't doubt that they're trying to, but I don't know if it's just a total shortage. The market is probably dictating at this point in time that if you have a CDL license and you can drive, it's probably more lucrative to go work for a private trucking company as opposed to a school bus type operation. There's a number of different factors. Also, even just getting through the licensing and the training process to get a CDL license is difficult, takes a lot of time. They're trying to put people through. I do know that sometimes people will go through. They might try bus driving for a little bit, not like it, and then they have that license. So there's nothing stopping them to go work for, again, like a private trucking type company that would require it. So I do think this is a longer term issue because like our transportation contract is up this year with the company. So we're going to be going out to bid for a new contract starting for the next school year. I would anticipate they're going to have to be more competitive with their wage structure. So if that's the case, they're going to be passing those additional costs off to us. We already know that there's no competition within the really the big bus field. North Reading kind of has a monopoly up here in our area. There are 1 or 2 other bigger companies that potentially could compete. They just don't happen to be in our area, and I don't know how, we're going to look at it, but how sincere we'd be able to try to attract one of those other groups in. So this is something we have to work on. I think we do need to, kind of sharpen our pencil and figure out what is the bare minimum number of buses that we need to get our kids to school safely and timely every day. Because if we do have some excess buses on there and we can cut that out, not only financially, would it help, but I'm not looking to do this for financial reasons, but I mean, that would certainly be helpful. It's more just the efficiency for the families of knowing, you can count on your bus to come at a particular time every day. And it's just not one more thing to have to worry about.
I was
So,
gonna ask that question. So how are we being billed? Are we being billed for 29 buses a week or just the number of buses that are actually running?
No, well, I mean, our contract calls for the 29 buses, but we don't pay for buses that aren't being used. It's, so we pay per bus per day.
Okay.
So I'm not concerned about like overpaying or paying for a service we're not getting.
Right, that's what.
It's a bigger issue of just the inconvenience for families at this point. That's what we're trying to work through. So we can deal with the billing piece. That's not a big thing. And again, ironically, money is not the issue here. I'd much rather just have the 29 buses and have our system flowing. But if there's just no end in sight, I think we have to do something to try to create a little bit of normalcy on that. The other issue, honestly, that's been a disaster is anytime you need the buses for after-school runs. So our athletic teams who contract, for buses in the afternoon, all school year long, they just have not been available because when they get done a Chelmsford run, they go out and do a run for Drake or the Greater Lowell Vogue or something like that. So all of our athletic events, which would normally start at like 3 or 3:30 in the afternoon, have had to get bumped to like 4, 4:30 or 5 because you just physically can't get a bus available at the end of the school day to be able to contract, even though we pay separately for that. They're just not available. So I know that's been an additional burden on parents. A lot of parents have had to drive to events. We might be able to get a bus to bring kids home at the end of an event, but we just can't get them there. And there's no end in sight. Even on that front, we're not bound to just North Reading, but the other bus companies in the area, like Tewksbury Transit and a bunch of other ones, they don't physically have capacity either to help us. So that I unfortunately also don't see going away. That's going to be a challenge. And I think a third, and then anyone can jump in there if they want to. Another issue that we're going to be dealing with is, I also think this is going to pretty significantly hamper field trips during the course of the school year. Because you just can't timely plan to have a bus available to go to, say, the Museum of Science or, the aquarium or something like that. Any of the extra buses aren't available for those kind of shuttle runs until all the regular district stuff is done, as well as they've taken care of all their other contracts. So you can get in a situation where if you don't have a bus available until 10 o'clock or 10:30 in the morning, is it even worth trying to drive into Boston for a field trip because you're going to have to leave to get back here by, 1 or 1:30 because they may have to use a bus twice for a different run. So we may start to get some, we're just getting back into that season now. We may start to get some pushback from field trips, and there's just not a heck of a lot we can do about it. But just want to make you aware of that. Joanna, were there any other
I just wanted to
glaring issues?
mention too, on a positive note, the late runs for the after-school programs start tomorrow. The 8 buses we run late in the day, whatever, after 4. So hopefully those will go well, and at least our students will have our own after-school activities and be able to get home on a bus. So we'll see how that starts tomorrow.
Great, any other questions on transportation? Okay, thank you for the update.
Fourth item this evening is just discussion of follow-up to our district-wide facilities master plan visioning session. I actually have a meeting with Dora Whittier on Thursday, so we'll review how they thought that first session went. Overall, I thought the discussion that occurred was very relevant and very good discussion. They did send us a link to the video from that evening, so we got that up on the website. I talked to them because obviously we didn't get the participation in person that we probably would have liked that evening. One of the topics on Thursday to talk about is there a way to, send that link out to our families in one of our correspondences with some type of a survey or an instrument that they could actually kind of fill out, watch the video or even particular snippets of the video, and then provide us some feedback just for taking into consideration. So we're going to have that discussion on Thursday. I'll let you know how that goes. We've got a couple of other in-district events planned to get some additional data. And then we are going to have that second public input session in November. So we're going to kind of keep pushing that date to try to get that to be available. But I'll have a better sense on Thursday. Like I said, and then anyone can jump in. I thought it was a good session. I thought they did a nice job kind of reviewing where we're at, how we got there. We're starting to do a lot of work with just even the 10-year capital plan. So it's very worthwhile work. We're just trying to figure out how we get a bigger voice into the discussion at this point.
Any thoughts on the?
I thought it was good. I thought of course, like, you probably all feel the same. I think we could get more people. It would be nice to have a greater amount of input from the public itself. What's the next session, November
I think it's the 9th,
9th? Okay, and it's at the Elks?
correct.
Is there any way at all to Zoom it? No.
There isn't, because they can't broadcast, Chelmsford Telemedia can't broadcast from there.
Okay. So it's just the taped part of it. But maybe if we could make sure that it's out on all the schools, and I think Dr. Hirsch said you're working on getting it out through the schools to make sure that as many people participate as possible.
Yeah, we're gonna bring that up. I know, like, that'll even be a topic I just mentioned at the Council of Schools tomorrow night, because even if we could get like a handful of parents from each of our schools to come and just provide some feedback even from their schools, we're gonna try to do that. And we'll talk with Dora and Whittier on Thursday about any other ideas that they have to collect some more information. I know they did also mention that even when they had done sessions where you had some people in person and some people remote, the sessions don't go as smoothly as if you either just had a fully remote or a fully in-person session. But I'm gonna talk through with them the options as we get closer to that meeting. But I know, we don't really have a tool to use with them just based on our ability to broadcast out of that center internally or even the telemedia front. But we'll work to try to do the very best we can, and when we get together at that first meeting in November, whatever the final kind of consensus or conclusion is, we'll share that with you, so that we're, again, talking about it before the session, and then the public can see that.
Okay.
Any other thoughts, Donna?
I'm wondering if it would be worth it for us to reach out to some of the various groups around town, our town meeting reps, PTOs, school improvement councils or school site councils, and just say, look, this is an opportunity for you, to come and give some input, maybe a little bit more of a directed approach to, getting people to attend. It's just a thought.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think I am certainly gonna do that with the, like the PTOs and any of the different groups that are associated with the schools, like the leadership groups. I also didn't kind of put a big push on this with like staff, because I didn't want it to be like a staff-dominated discussion either. But I'm gonna make sure this next time that we at least have some representatives from each of the schools, both parents and even at the high school level, or middle school too, I guess, you could have some student perspective if we could get some students there. I don't think at the elementary level that'd be appropriate, but the middle and some of the high school kids, we certainly could get to help out. So we will work on that. We'll work on that.
All right, thoughts?
On the middle schools and the high school, even approaching directly their councils, 'cause they have student councils at both middle schools and at the high school.
Right.
I think it would be good, because those particular students might be more involved in this type of input and so on, focusing on that as well. It would be good. I think the town rep's idea is a good one, too.
Yeah, no, we definitely can push that, even if the, in addition to that meeting, I know, like, we're gonna try to have a small assembly, group meeting with, because the middle school topic came up, middle school specific, students, but we can kind of do that during the school day. Staff, we can do right after school, so I think we'll be able to get opportunity for staff and student input, even if it's not on the meeting on the 9th, get it ahead of time, so that we can then kind of present out what the discussion was and where the staff were coming from.
Just to ask Sarah, but I think, Sarah, class reps is also another representative group, right?
Yeah, and I know it's like a club for most of the time, but then they get elected as seniors, so you could definitely ask them.
So it's both student council and class reps, right?
Yes.
Two big groups.
Okay. We're on it, because we want to get that input and
That'd be
really
great.
have the results.
And if we give them a little lead time, then they can maybe discuss it at their meetings ahead of time, so that they understand what the process is and what kind of input that we're looking for.
Okay.
And that's the thing, this isn't just about like building a new school. We're looking at where we are we're looking at how we've done in the past with the master
Right.
plan, where we are right now, what we can do short-term, and possibilities long-term. So it's not just about, building a new school. It's
Right, correct.
Well, all the way through.
One more thought. Today I received a survey to do from the high school. I believe it's about the accreditation process.
Yeah.
Is any of that data and that survey information something that can be used in planning? I don't know. I haven't done the survey yet.
Right.
So I don't know what it's asking me. But if any part of it can also be used in terms of the planning, it might be a useful thing to look at.
I will look, even other survey instruments we have. I haven't taken that survey for a long
Yeah,
time.
it's a self-assessment process right now, just getting opinions on where people think we are for multiple things. Some of them does include facilities, but I don't know if we'll have all that data back in
Okay.
time, and it's high school specific.
All right,
Is this NIAS?
NEASC, it's the NEASC accreditation.
accreditation.
What's that?
This is so much fun.
They're
Oh,
wonderful.
I know.
Yeah, just a joy. All right,
right.
any other thing on that, on the facilities? Okay. All right.
All right, Linda will review the academic data for you. We have a report out on some of last year's MCAS scores and then some of the pre-assessments we're doing this year, so I'll turn it over to
Speaking
Linda.
of joy, here comes my presentation. Don't let the PowerPoint scare you. We're going to already be through a lot of these slides. It looks worse than it is. But the overall, because there's a lot of nuances that I'm going to be speaking about tonight, because this is just not very cut and dry to say this is what happened, this is the trends, this is what we're expecting. But I think just to kind of summarize everything that I'll be talking about tonight is, I know there's been a lot of talk around how are our students doing? Did they really fall so far behind because of the pandemic? I would have to say, overall, I don't see us so far behind as a school district that we will not be able to remedy and get our kids back with footing that they need to be successful in school. I think a lot of that comes to, obviously, the credit of the work, the incredible work that the teachers did in their classrooms. We kept our schools working simultaneously. In other words, we were broadcasting at the same time. It wasn't come to school for half a day for some and go home and work on your own. So keeping our schools up and running the way we did for the 13 months and also having our kids come back in person last year is just, I think, really, the driving force of why we're in the position that we're in right now. Even some of, we've been working with our consultants through iReady. They have larger data points than we do around nationally, and they have even commented to us saying, wow, you guys really did a nice job compared to a lot of your counterparts or school districts similar to the Chelmsford Public Schools. So that's the good news part of it. Is there work to do? Absolutely. Do we know where we need to do it? Yes. So it's just a matter of trying to get an understanding and looking it over all at once and trying to find the best ways to target certain areas with our additional personnel and then through our lessons that we have. So that's my summary of a lot of information I'm going to give you. So I'm going to be going over 3 of our major beginning of the year data points. 2 of the beginning of the year data points and then Mcas Spring from 2021. So you can have formative data of where we are right now in the district and what happened at the end of the year last year. So starting with iReady. So iReady is one of our benchmarking systems that we have here. We do 3 diagnostics a year to find out where our students are, but it also has a MyPath plan where it's adaptive. It puts students where they need to be and then provides them with lessons to help them close the gap or extend their learning if they're already at their grade level at this point. So we're going to be looking at beginning of the year data. And I think what's important to note here is that there are different ways to look at your data as you go through any system, whether it's iReady, another program that you have. But what's important to note is that these are end of the year standards that we are looking at for our students right now. So if you're in 7th grade, it's where you should be at the end of 7th grade. So we have to have certain cutoffs at the beginning of the year, middle of the year, and the end of the year to see if students are making that progress. So the data that you're seeing tonight is beginning of the year data to find out where we really need to target our students and find out where we need to make some adjustments in our curriculum and lesson planning. So we got through the first 3 slides, so this is very quick. So again, it's hard when we're presenting, it's a little small to be looking at, but this is overall data for the whole district, right? So it's combining all of our students, K through 8, into one document. What happens with all of our data is that you can drill it down to the school level, the grade level, the teacher level, and ultimately look at individual students. We will only be looking at more of the surface data because to look at all the different levels would be a very, very long PowerPoint and a very long evening. But overall, this is what I'm talking about with the beginning of the year view. So this is an end of the year standard. What they have done is they have come up with breakpoints of where we think students should be at the beginning of the school year for an end of the year standard. So what you'll notice here is you're seeing a lot of green, which is great. And this is for the ELA specifically. And what we're looking to do here is to say, okay, students that are in the green with typical lesson plans and going through the school year should succeed and start to become closer to the end of the year standard. What this helps us do is identify those students that are in the yellow, and those are the students that we would be providing more instruction or intervention to, rather than not with good instruction. So they're a tier 2 student. They wouldn't be for special ed. They would be for tier 2, which means they just need additional instruction or intervention during the school year. And then our students that are in red are students that are most likely receiving specialized services in the district when we drill it down to those students, and to take a look at how we're going to support them as well. So it's looking at the beginning of the year data really is helpful to identify those students in the yellow that we have to be able to give some more support to as the school year goes on to close that gap for them. So what I wanted to find out, because it was, interesting to me of like, okay, well, this is where we are now. What's it been like as we've been going through these past few school years? Because iReady is the only data we have that has no gaps in it. We've been able to administer it every year, except for that at end of the year diagnostic that in spring 2020 when COVID hit. But this is the only time we've actually had beginning of the year data for multiple years. In fact, I could go back another year prior to this, but we're looking at a 3-year trend. And I wanted to see if there's been such a significant change in student learning over the past few years. The ones that are highlighted in yellow is pre-COVID. So this is all before COVID. It's beginning of the year data in September 2019, the fall prior to when COVID hit our district. And as you can see, there are definitely some fluctuations, but we're not seeing such huge fluctuations in beginning of the year data. That's alarming, but it allows us to make those adjustments. This just gives you a kind of a snapshot of what's happening at the schools. So anything in the parentheses are the students that are in that yellow that I'm talking about. And this is what it's looked like over the course of the several years. So 2019 is pre-COVID. September 2020 is when they came back after being out from March to June. And then obviously September 2021 after a year of hybrid / remote / everything put together. And we're not seeing huge jumps in our numbers, which is good. This is a good thing, right? We do have to make some gains some places, but we're not seeing those huge jumps in numbers that are alarming enough to us in ELA. Okay. Again, moving on to mathematics, same thing. This is that district overview piece that we're seeing, beginning of the year data, to find out where those students in the yellow, and then making sure that those students that are in the red are receiving some type of specialized services. And again, looking at the 3-year data trend, wanted to see if there was some changes. Math is where you start to see some of those, fluctuations getting a little bit bigger, and we'll talk a little bit about that when we get to Mcas as well. And making sure that we're taking a look at where we need to target students. So in both ELA and math, what this does is it breaks it down into strands and domains, right? Those are almost like the topic sentences. And what we're finding both in ELA and in math, in ELA, there's 2 very, large foundational strands out there, which is obviously phonemic awareness and phonics. If kids do not have those in place, they can't read. And then high frequency words. So in ELA, our students have a good foundation of phonics, phonemic awareness, and high frequency words. What we're seeing is we really have to put some work into vocabulary, and that's not even just ELA, that's academic vocabulary, so that could be across all the content areas, so that helps with comprehension, and then obviously comprehension of literature and nonfiction text. So that helps us when we start really breaking down this data to say, what is it that we really need to help our students to support them to have better comprehension, because their reading skills for the majority of our students, if not more than the majority, we're very close to all students having very good reading foundational skills in place. When you look at the mathematics, there's 4 domains. The 2 foundational domains is numbers and operations, as well as algebra and algebraic equations. Then you get into geometry and measurement. That's where we're seeing kids really lagging, but we have to really put more emphasis into the 2 foundational domains right now, which is the numbers and operations and algebra and algebraic equation, because without those, you can't move forward into some of the other domains such as geometry and for measurement. So this data from iReady has really allowed us to get even deeper to find out where we really going to target our students. Because the story that you'll see, and you'll see with MCAS, is that what was affected the most was mathematics, and that's across the board. The other thing that I found is a trend, which is a true trend, is that for the math, it's really been hitting like our mid grades. So third grade in particular, that would be the same for ELA. Those kids had missed their first grade and second grade. That's where they were affected. And again, foundational years, and then you'll see that trend again in sixth grade. So it's almost those mid-year grades that we're seeing, those are the kids that we really have to, it's nice to have interventionists for like a grade 5 and 6, but we really might have to shift all the interventionists to grade 6 because that's where the real tipping point is for us, or same for grade 3. So that's how we have to use our resources and really dig down further with a lot of this data, rather than just having blanket, extra support for a couple of grade levels, because where there's a natural break, like K1 and 2 is usually, you have a reading specialist for K1 and 2, and then you have one for 3 and 4. Well, we might have to service more kids in, say, K1 and 2 or grade 3. Is that making sense? And then what I've also broken down to is just looking at the tier 3 students to see, okay, how many kids, has there been a big trend up in students in tier 3? And we're seeing that more at middle school where it's trending up, not necessarily at the elementary level. So that's why there's been a lot of changes happening at middle school, just to really decide, okay, what are we teaching, when are we teaching, and why are we teaching it? Because that is where we're seeing the trend, and you'll see that in MCAS as well. So middle school is where we're trying to really put our efforts into, whether it's new curriculum, new programming, ways that we're looking at lesson planning, assessment practices for students. And with that trending up, that's an important place to take a look at for obviously tier 2, but obviously tier 3 students as well. So one of the other things that we look at is the indicators of basic early literacy skills. I left the next few slides saying Dibbles. We use Acadience Learning. Dibbles is one company through the University of Oregon. Acadience is just another company. I think I've spoke about that before. And this will just give us an idea of how our students are doing with early literacy skills, and if we need to put some more, support for them. So it looks like in kindergarten, the past 3 years, the trend has been pretty equal for our students as they've been coming through for kindergarten for placement. First grade is the one that's a little confusing to us, and what the problem is, I really like to see the 2018 data to find out if this 62% at the beginning of the year is an anomaly or not, only because it just seems odd that we were from 62 to 40 to 49. So 40 to 49 says a different story than the 62. The only issue we run into is that we did used to use the University of Oregon as their data base, and we don't have access to it anymore. So Kelly Rogers and I have been trying to get previous data. I've been looking at a few of my other presentations to see if it was in there, because this 62 is very, it's just off the charts for us, and then dipping down to a 40 and a 49. So I may not have the story here until I get the information, or also trends in previous years to see where Chelmsford lies for grade 1, or is this a grade level that really needs some serious support? The other data points don't tell us that it does as much as, say, grade 3, but it's important that we just take a look at these current first graders, just to make sure that we are not missing something for those students. Wouldn't surprise me where many of them didn't go to kindergarten or didn't go to a preschool program. So those foundational years are huge for us. So we're really kind of digging a little deeper into this dynamic data to find out what's happening for first grade. And then part of that process is the RAN, which is the Rapid Automated Naming System. And this is our dyslexia screener for, what we are using it as a district. And what that does is it just gives us an idea of how quickly kids can do fluency work and when they come in for K and 1 while looking at pictures. And the good news here is that we're seeing less students coming through that would be identified to be looked at further for any type of dyslexia as they're doing their reading fluency. So that is part of the good news. If you can see the trends, we've always stayed under that 10th percentile with 9% of our students. And we're trending down with obviously 7 to now 5% of our students that we would look into further to see if there's any issues with dyslexia. So those are like the big formative assessments that we have in the district. So what we do at the beginning of the year, we also have a mid-year one. When we get to, and before we get to MCAS, what we'll do is, this is just a snapshot. We have benchmark dates for everything, for all of our grade levels, including like end of the year marking periods, just so that we're not stepping on each other's toes, making sure that everything's in alignment with our report cards that go out as well. So this is just a snapshot. We're gonna continue with our benchmarks. But before we get into any of the MCAS testing, because this is a little bit, has more nuances and variables to it, I just want to stop and see what people have for questions about our formative data before I try to break down the MCAS data.
No, I think the data reflects kind of what the discussions parents are having. A lot of kids are having trouble with math right now, including in my house. There's been a lot of intervention and people just trying to get that worked out. I think it's obvious that it hurt, having a year outside of the school essentially, and then losing half another year affected kids. So, especially in math, it seems.
Another thing that I think seems to be consistent in all the reports is that when they get to the middle school level, those percentages always seem to be more troubling than when we're in the elementary level. And because I've been in the high school for the last 4 years where things get pretty tough very quickly, I'm hoping to see what we can do to get those fixed as quickly as we can, to help people so that when they enter the high school, when each student enters the high school, it's with their best footing possible.
Right.
Otherwise, we don't have as much intervention at that level, I think, as we would in the middle schools and in the elementary. So I think it's really important to get that fixed as soon as we can.
Yeah, we've actually put in for more interventionists at the middle school level because that is important. And like I said, if you look at those strands and domains, I mean, it's easy to be like, I'm just gonna teach everything that I normally teach. Well, that may not be this year, right? We really have to make sure that we're really touching on those different strands and domains because they are the foundational ones for students. And if they're not in place, then you will start to see even larger gaps. So I know it gets tough, and especially like in even using some of our programs. So like iReady is like a double dose, right? So you're getting your instruction from your teacher. Here's another way to then help you move forward. It's hard to do everything in the classroom. I get it. We've been there before. But at the end of the day, if we don't give the students access to a lot of these different systems that we have, then it's going to be, we're going to see larger gaps. So it's just making sure we're utilizing everything, taking a step back, making sure that we're reviewing this stuff, not covering, reviewing, and making sure that the students need what they need, and then putting other things in place like interventionists at the middle school level.
I wonder if part of the problem too is, and we know that this happens with MCAS, is that sometimes, they test early and you don't have a chance to cover some of the material
Yep.
that may be on the test because you're actually teaching it after the kids have already taken the test.
Yep.
But, with regards to, how we paced the school year, that was brand new for teachers trying to do that. So, there may have been some things that that they weren't able to get to, and some things just didn't translate well in terms of a remote process.
Yep.
So,
I would agree.
I think that there's definitely a lot of factors that have to be taken into account for why this may have happened.
Yeah, and it's true, like, we know that, like, if they were putting more focus on the other two domains.
Right.
And it's just, if you can't get to it, you can't get to it. But I would rather them not get to something that is something we can remedy down the road than not give them what they need at the beginning stages of their teaching. So, yeah, there was a lot, and we don't know, for example, like how many of these kids were fully remote compared to being hybrid, right? So that's a whole nother layer and study to find out, did the remote students do better than the hybrid students, and was that only in certain grade levels? So you can dig and keep going and going, but at some point you have to decide, this is what the data is telling us, this is what these are the kids in front of us right now. Let's take a look at what we have, and then let's lesson plan around those different domains and strands so that we can help these students that are here now, rather than worrying about longitudinal studies or anything like that.
Just because I don't know the system as well in terms, of the, I've been away from elementary and middle for a little while, so I just want to understand. So because it's this kind of year that we're dealing with, if teachers are seeing that, they need more intervention, more time with particular students, whatever is, what is the method we have that teachers can give that kind of input and make sure that the kids are going to, that it reaches your level, that it reaches the level of somebody who can add additional support and so on? How do we do that?
Well, I mean, that's just through our conversations with students, right? I mean, with teachers to find out what some type of a supports are. Like, I looked immediately what was happening at middle school, and I said, we need to put in 2 more reading interventionists and 2 more math interventionists, so that if students need to have specialized lessons, there's another body there to be able to provide that support. Or, because there's another layer here too of kids came back to school not knowing how to act in school, right? So it wasn't even just like your typical, like, I'm gonna put them in stations, right? So that kids would be working productively, so teachers could take small groups. Well, that wasn't an easy task for everybody this year to set expectations, because kids weren't realizing how to even behave, let alone be able to do the work. So we had, setting those expectations and those routines took a lot longer this school year. But having the interventions, we'd have to have there's usually clear entrance and exit strategies for students to go into intervention and then to come out of intervention. Because it's not something you go into and stay. It's something in addition to. So as we add these interventionists, teachers would then make requests and go through that process to be able to get some more support for their students. It's also a scheduling situation as well. So like, we're finding some other students that might need additional services like L services, and making sure that they are doing that during, say, ELA block rather than some of the other blocks. So there's so many little facets, especially at the middle school or when you get to high school with scheduling, that put blocks in place. But we're gonna have to just try and work with what we have and have teachers have these conversations around the students. And honestly, look at the cut scores for the data. Because sometimes I'll have people say, well, they can't read, for example. I'm like, well, they actually can read, but they need support in more vocabulary development or more how to look at informational text and use text features, right? So really deciding, is it that they really can't read, or is it that they just need some support in some of the other strands that were happening? So it's very important that we have like clear criteria based on cut scores of the data that we have.
I think we're forgetting that we have this layer of support for our staff and students through our curriculum coordinators. We'll be working, I would imagine, to help figure out, how this is going to occur, both horizontally and vertically.
Right.
So that we can get kids back on track.
Right.
So I'm assuming that they're coordinating with the teachers and building administration to figure out, what are we going to focus on? What are we going to maybe not focus as much time on,
Right.
because we only
Right,
have so
your
much time.
pacing that you have,
Right.
exactly. It's like, let's focus on this. So they've been writing, like, they've already been doing data meetings and writing goals based on those data meetings. So they're all kind of in unison together, working to make sure we know what we need to focus on.
So coordinators are working also to do this?
Yeah, so they have data meetings with the building principals, so they sit with the same data that we're talking about right now, but they, of course, are looking more at the, grade level, student level, down to with different domains and strands, and then as a group, they sit and have these conversations with teachers and go through that process, and then that's how they make decisions based on goals of what they're gonna be teaching for that year.
Okay.
So these meetings are already, like, in fact, tomorrow morning, they'll be at Center Elementary School, right? Going through the data with that staff. So these meetings are already either happened or going to be finished in the next week or so at K through 8 at this point. And then high school has seen their Mcas data as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the beginning of the year?
Yes, because now we're getting into
Right.
summative data.
Right, on the MCAS.
Okay, so let me try and break this down for you. I'm gonna have some clear breaking spots where you can ask some questions. So the nuances that are happening with MCAS is, if you remember, there's some subjects that were transitioning from legacy MCAS to next generation MCAS. And then there are some that are still in legacy MCAS, so that's why I'm gonna try and break it down as much as possible for you. So we're gonna start with the ELA and the math for grades 3 through 8. And the reason we're gonna start with them is that all students 3 through 8 are taking next generation's MCAS. They've been taking it since 2018. And they have the new proficiency ratings that go from a 440 to a 560. So we're gonna start and take a look there, and one of the things you have to keep in mind is that you really can't translate the old proficiency levels to the new proficiency levels per se, because they're not the same numbers, there's no percentile linking for them. However, students that are typically in the partially meeting expectations would have most likely scored a proficient in the legacy MCAS if they were taking it. So partially meeting expectations is not a bad place to be. You prefer them in meeting expectations, but partially meeting expectations is not the old needs improvement. It just means that they're making less progress than meeting expectations, but they would still be passing MCAS if they were in high school as a competency determination. All that math behind it. So, yeah, it gets a little confusing. So a couple of things, again, variables, this is not as clear cut to just look at 2018 up to 2020, 21. And the reason being is that there is no 2020 MCAS. There was no MCAS administered to any of the students, grades 3 through 8, in ELA or math. And the 2021 MCAS was not a full MCAS. So they did the smaller sessions. There was only one session for the 3 through 8 students. So even though you have the same proficiency levels, you are not looking at a horizontal line going across, looking at the exact same things because we had it. However, it's the closest we have to something equal at this stage of the game. And it does correlate directly with our iReady data that we have. We actually were part of a study with Curriculum Associates who put our data up against the MCAS data to make sure that what was happening with iReady was going to be a good predictor for how students would do at MCAS based on the standards. So one of the things you're seeing here, obviously, is that in ELA, there's not a huge fluctuation from the 2018 to 19 and then 19 to 2021. What you will start to see, and you'll see this in math a little bit larger, is that you're seeing more students move maybe from that exceeds expectations into meeting or partially meeting, and a little uptick is happening for our students that are not meeting expectations. So those are students that would not be technically passing MCAS if they were in high school. And to break it down a little bit further, so this is ELA only, in mathematics, you're seeing, this is where you're gonna see the larger fluctuation. So we kind of stayed steady from 2018 to 2019, pre-COVID. COVID hits, we don't have an MCAS in 2020. Fast forward to 2021, you're seeing a big difference. And I think it's important to note here too that we're not just looking at closing the gap for students, we're also worried about making sure those kids go back up to the higher ceiling, right? You can't just be focused on students that are not making progress. How are we going to then take those students that can make progress, but then should be making higher progress, right? So it's like an elastic band. You gotta think both sides of the end, and it stretches and it moves. Because I don't want it to just be like, oh, we're only gonna be focusing on kids that are not meeting standards. We're trying to also boost those kids up to the higher ceiling as well. Does that make sense? Okay.
So one thing is we knew that this was gonna happen in math last year. Everybody was predicting it.
Yeah, we saw it at the end of the year data for iReady as well.
But even in the middle of the year, we knew that kids were lagging in math. I have a question on the MCAS scoring, though. There was no change in the scoring, it was just a reduced number of items, correct? You know what I'm saying, the scoring standard that they were applying to the
Correct.
test? Okay.
So they did the math behind that, what would it look like? So 3 through 8 did one session, and then the high school only did 2 sessions instead of the 3. So it was like a half a MCAS, but it was a 1-day session for 3 through 8, 1 day for ELA, 1 for math, and then, 1 session for math over a couple of days, and then same for high school. They did 2 sessions instead of 3.
Right, but no change in how they would score this test?
Correct. That's why I kept these together, and
All
then
right.
we'll talk about the other scores as we go along. But it is still not the same 2-session test or 3-session test, and we don't have data from 2020 to see where was the biggest jump at this point. And then just to break it down by school, this is just to give you an idea, and again, these slides are by school. You're gonna see the same story most likely in all of these slides. The ELA doesn't have as big of a, changeover from students moving down into the different proficiency levels as you'll start to see in math. I mean, and remember, elementary only has grades 3 and 4 in it. Middle school has grades 5 through 8. Only third graders and fourth graders take MCAS at the elementary level. So this is 2 grade levels. And then same with center, you'll see that obviously the trend stays somewhat similar in ELA, moving down in mathematics, and those kids moving from the exceed expectation tend to move to meet expectation, and then the domino effects happens all the way through.
But there's also a correlation between ELA and math in that I always found that as they were learning, if their ability to excel in ELA was not there, they were going to have a very difficult time doing any kind of problem solving in math because the comprehension was not there in the reading of the problem and understanding it.
Yeah.
So there is a correlation there as well. And again, I think these numbers are reflecting the same thing that we saw in our own testing and our own assessment, which is that, there is a great difference here between what's happening at the elementary level and at the middle school level. The same thing is reflected in the MCAS. And I am not a high proponent of MCAS. If you're going to ask me if it has any great impact, I don't like people just teaching to tests, but it's reflecting the same thing, I think.
Yeah, you will. It's a direct correlation with our benchmark data, so this is not, and there is that, the elementary seems to be having more holding patterns of where kids typically are, and we are starting to see the gap widen and when they get to middle school.
And it could widen into the middle schools because of the problem with ELA as well. Because then when you get into the middle school level of math, it has more need for that greater comprehension in the reading as well.
Oh, yeah, the math coordinator doesn't want to hear me say this, but I will say, and I say it to the science coordinator too, I'm like, if they can't read, we're gonna have a
They can't
problem
do
when they
math.
get to the other it's hard when they start getting to the other subjects.
That is
here.
correct.
Absolutely. Literacy is the foundation of everything that we do.
Of course, with ELA, if they're just reading on their own, they can maintain and show improvements, whereas in math, can't necessarily do that.
Yeah,
You
well-
sit down, you pick up a book, you read, you're working on those skills,
Right.
as opposed to sitting down doing 20
Well, in
math.
the ELA skills spiral, you're always working on them. So when you get to sometimes the math and the science, you need one before the other. So that's why I was saying those 2 larger domains, if they're not in place and students don't have fluency with mathematics as well, so we talk about fluency with reading, but you need to have math fluency, you have to be able to do math in your head, mental math, quick math, things that make sense. It was funny because if you did print out the packet, I was looking at this, I'm like, that math doesn't make sense. But if you don't have the wherewithal to do that, I realized I had an error in my slides, so I had to go and fix my slides, which are being updated on the website. You have to know, wait a minute, that those numbers don't match, right? Like, be able to look for patterns and things that you're seeing. So we're starting to see that uptick in mathematics as we start going through these years, and that's gonna be super important for the focus.
But I think it's important, though, that we're talking about reading, but we're really not. We're talking about comprehension, we're talking about fluency. And there's a
Correct.
lot of components that go into reading. But if a student is struggling in all of those components, then they're gonna be struggling in all areas of their academics.
Absolutely. And as we go through each of the schools, I'll try and slow it down just for the viewing audience, if they're looking at the scores, and again, this will be up on the website. You're starting to see some of those, same trends happening as we go through each of the elementary schools. And then we go into the middle schools, and you're gonna see even more of a downward trend as we get to the mathematics part of it.
What's interesting, if you look at, so Chelmsford's got students that are a little behind where they should be. If you look at the states, everybody in the state's the same. I mean, the amount that we've gone down and let's say, meeting expectations, If you look at the state data, it's the exact same percentage. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
and but
incredible
we're,
how.
and we're higher than the state, which
Right,
is
we're,
great.
yeah, we're always higher than the
Always
state.
higher than the state,
Right.
but the whole state went down, right?
Yeah.
So for MCAS, it's apples to apples in
Right.
the sense of, at least we have the state data, not that we're comparing everything to the state, but the same, you're right, the same percentage went down across the board. All of my colleagues that I talked to, they're all saying the same things, and they're seeing the same trends in the grade levels. So there's definitely something to those grade levels of when those kids missed their schooling, right? So kids that have been in school for a long time, already were heading towards high school, we're not seeing as big of a gap. You see some of those, like that grade 3 jumped right out at me. I was like, uh-oh, those are the kids that missed first and second grade. Those are the grades that were affected. They didn't miss the grade. They were affected. We also have a lot of students that, came out of school, and then when we went back full-time, they came back to school, so they were receiving their education outside of the Chelmsford Public Schools, whether they went to a private school, whether they were homeschooled. So there's something to be said about our teachers teaching our students and keeping them in the school district, and anybody moving around. So there's, again, you could do multiple studies and look at things, but at the end of the day, we really just have to be like, these are the big skills that we really have to hone in on this year to start closing that gap and raising the ceiling for those students that already have a closed gap.
Dennis, to your point about the state average one, this was the big argument for not doing MCAS, but the state pushed back and said we need it for assessment purposes,
Right,
right? So, because it was gonna be no surprise that this is what was gonna happen. We all knew it,
right.
just based on what it was that we were seeing in the fall of last year from the previous spring.
Right.
So,
So even though this is summative data, it's almost equal to our formative data
right,
for this school year, for like the fall.
right.
Like, if we didn't have like an iReady, if a school district doesn't have some type of benchmarking, they
Right.
could have used this more as a formative piece.
Right, and that was the other reason the state pushed back, because not every city or town across the state does the kind of assessment that we do.
Correct. They were
And
gonna
so that's
offer
why they wanted
assessments if
MCAS.
you didn't have it.
Right, right.
But again, that would have been a free product that somehow you would have ended up paying for down the road. So, and there's a lot of work that goes into getting these products up and running and the timing of it. So this is where it's gonna start to get a little bit more confusing. That's why I teased out the ELA math and science for the high school, and then the science for grade 5 and 8. And this is where you're seeing legacy testing in 2018, next generation testing in 19 and 2021, but only legacy testing for science, because we grandfathered a lot of those kids into not having to take MCAS as a competency determination. So I'll explain as we go along for each of these. But again, you're not supposed to compare, like, the warning is, in failing, is not necessarily that not meets expectation, because the numbers don't match up. However, like, if you remember when we were getting designations for a school district before this all happened in 2019, Chelmsford was partially meeting expectations as a district. Most of the Merrimack Valley was partially meeting expectations, which is not a failure in MCAS, it's just that we want to be moving towards meeting expectations for all students. So for the science, and this is where, like I said, you're gonna see different scoring going on. In 2018, they took the legacy test, which had the old proficiency ratings that you can't equate to the 2019. But if you look at 2019 to 2021, 2021, without a 2020 test, you'll see that where the difference is more so kids going from meeting expectations to partially meeting expectations. And again, MCAS is only given in science for grades 5, 8, and then 10. And when we get to the high school, that's gonna be a different story, but I'll explain that when we get to that point. So this is where we're seeing, so for grade 5, the students were typically in the good shape. We saw the kids going down from the exceeding expectations more so to the meeting expectations when they got to 2021. It's a little bit of a different story for grade 8. This is where you're seeing more of the students coming out of even exceeding and meeting expectations to partially meeting expectations for the 2019, 2021 Next Generation Science Standard. So those kids were affected, and those students are now currently freshmen in high school that will be taking MCAS unless you're a fresh, well, they already took it. So those kids will be taking their MCAS in the spring when it comes to taking biology, unless they're in honors biology freshman year. So ELA, same thing, they started off with a legacy test in 2018 and moved over to the next generation science standards. Next generation ELA test. And we didn't see much of a difference. In fact, you see a little bit more of an uptick of going into meeting expectations. So ELA still kind of holding strong as we go through all of our different testing, whether it be iReady type testing, benchmark testing, common assessments. But in mathematics is where you see that dip that happened in 2021 with more students moving into meeting expectations, partially meeting expectations. And interestingly enough, not meeting expectations is lower than what we had in 2019. So there is that uptick when they get to high school. And a lot of it has to do even too with services and the way they're structured scheduling wise. These kids have designated blocks to receive any type of services that they have at the high school. So that is very helpful when they get to that point.
Can we talk about math MCAS for just a second?
Sure.
Just in terms of the composition of the test, I've noticed a change, where it seems like it seems like the level is higher than just Algebra 1 and geometry now.
It is,
Yeah.
it is, but those are big skills for the students. I mean, most students, if they're not taking a lot of honors and AP classes moving forward, they are taking algebra, geometry, then they're going to algebra 2, and then some kids go into statistics, or they take another mathematics that are up there. But some of the kids that are already taking honors at middle school go right into that whole geometry piece, and then algebra 2, and then they're taking a lot of their AP classes starting junior and senior year.
It looks like the MCAS test it just seems to be testing, as I said, at a higher level in math than it did, say, 5 years ago.
Well, it would actually be 3, right, 2018, 4 years ago, because that's the legacy test. The legacy, last time we had that was 2018.
Okay, yep.
So the next generation is a little bit meatier
Yep.
when it comes to this.
It really is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we had to make the changes in curriculum on when kids were taking certain classes because their program of studies wouldn't have lined up for it.
Right. Okay.
So it's a little bit tougher test.
It is a tougher test. I can't get over the difference.
It is. I mean, so, like I said at the beginning, I'm not like so alarmed that it's like, oh my gosh, our kids all completely plummeted. What are we gonna do? We have some plans in place and we really feel confident that we can support these students and, like I said, raise it all the way up, not just kids that are not meeting expectations or partially meeting expectations. How do we move kids more into exceeding expectations? And this is where it gets a little nuanced. So science is only on the legacy test. Now, don't get excited. I see, when you see that 72% jump up, this is the biology test. It was only for the freshmen. The sophomores, who are now currently juniors, did not need to take the MCAS as a competency determination, so they were not tested. So the only students that were tested were our freshmen because they take honors biology. So these are all the honors biology students taking the biology test. Hence, we're gonna see that big, uptick in percentage. So as great as the science department is and, John Morris leading the way there, these were our best students just taking the test. And that's happening in a lot of districts, so it's not just Chelmsford. So any of our current juniors do not need to take the science MCAS to graduate high school. They're gonna pass their science courses as almost like an EPP status, and they will graduate from high school. So there were no sophomores taking the test last year, only freshmen, because they did not get grandfathered into the no testing waiver, whatever they were calling it at DESE. So that's why you're seeing such an uptick. So typically we run closer to that 42% in exceeds, but our science scores are pretty high in general. But you can say that our students that are, in the not meeting, they actually went down even further. So that's helpful for our students to just be getting some of that support. But like I said, I don't want to get anybody too excited about the science scores, but it is what it is at this
We
point.
don't have to give John Morris a big raise.
No, he's not getting a big raise.
All right.
No. In fact, he had to drag a lot of skeletons around for us for the Blue Bash, so he's probably not answering any calls from me in the next 2 weeks, so it should be good. So, as I said, there's a lot of variables, nuances to the testing, who got tested, who doesn't have to be tested, who's waived in, who's doing legacy, but all in all, I feel like at least we have some internal benchmarking to look at. We don't have to wait for MCAS. We don't have to wait for somebody to tell us our students aren't doing well. Our teachers have a very good handle on things. They've been working extremely hard. They're exhausted at this point. But I think we're very positioned to do well and to kind of get back to normal as we go through this whole pandemic, hopefully soon to be endemic.
Thank you, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Did anybody time that to see how long I?
Just ask a question. Could you just explain for people who needs MCAS right now to be able to graduate? And then last year's MCAS was billed as an assessment, but it was not necessarily for our high school sophomores, correct?
Yeah, so the only people that need to take MCAS at this point will be our current sophomores
Okay,
for ELA and math,
All right.
and any sophomores that did not take the biology MCAS.
and that will be a graduation
That
requirement.
is competency determination graduation requirement to graduate from high school.
And for our juniors and seniors?
Juniors and seniors have, if they have passed their math, ELA, and science courses between now and graduation, they will graduate from high school.
Thank you.
And then that's what you were saying about the testing, the spring MCAS, even though it was a summative MCAS, we don't have any determination of like your school district is, at meeting,
Right.
partially meeting, we have no designation.
Right.
And quite honestly, in my opinion, it's more of a formative data because it correlates exactly with our current formative data that we have on students.
And there's no plans by DESI to do that, correct?
To give us designations?
Right.
No.
Okay.
It is what it is at this point. Like,
Okay.
I don't have DART districts, I don't have any of the above.
Okay.
So it's almost like we're starting, as they started to transition into the next generation science tests and everything, we thought we should be going on our third year of trend data. We have no trend data. We're back to square one.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
I'm up next again, I think.
Yes, Linda, we're still listening to Linda.
We're still listening. Yeah, it's called
And then
Listening
we
with
have another
Linda.
report on that new on-demand tutoring service that we've subscribed to. So Dr. Hirsch is going to walk us through that.
I'm just going to keep going. So we did talk about this, and I believe, Sarah, you gave an update the last time that students were going to start using paper. So part of our support mechanism is, how can we help students outside of the school day? And as we started to investigate different ways to do that, usually we try to do academic tutoring, after school, before school type programs, but it's very hard to do because spacing is limited, as well as, having staff that has the ability to come and work in the mornings or the afternoons and all day long. So finding people, trying to find space for everyone was a kind of a conundrum. So when we found this program paper, we took a look at it as a whole admin team to just say, okay, what is it that this has to offer? And we met with the company and, it was a pretty good, process. Part of our ESSER grant requires us to put a certain percentage of money towards outside support for students outside the school day. So this was a great way to be able to use our ESSER funding, right, to try it out. If it's going to work out, great, we can continue with it because we have enough money to fund it for several years. And if it ends up being something that we feel is very important and is being used, it's something we could then eventually assume or build into some of our other grant funding as we go along through the school year. So we had a chance to meet with paper, and they gave us a tutorial, an overview of everything, but the bottom line is, and I also thought that this was like too good to be true until I saw it like several times. I was like, this can't work, but I'm going to be very excited to see how it comes out at the end of the day. But it's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week tutoring program. Sounds crazy, right? That students can get support, they can go online, they can ask for, in multiple subjects, any type of questions that they have. They can upload different essays that they have for feedback. And it's something that they can access anytime on any computer. There's professional development for all of us, and all of the recordings with the paper tutors are transcribed for us, so people can see exactly what was going on. So there's no video component to it, because that was my first concern. I'm like, what does this look like? It's 2 a.m. Who's getting online with our students? It works almost like a text-based thing, and we're gonna see a little demonstration as we go along. It works like a text-based and a lot of questioning, and they also have the option of pulling up like a Jamboard type product to go through a process with them. One of the things I found was interesting, and it's probably more so because I was an English teacher, is that you can upload a paper and they will annotate back to you some of the areas that you can work on. And you can upload anytime you want. You can upload the same paper multiple times. It doesn't have to just be an English paper. It could be a lab report. It could be a like college essay that you were writing. So I thought that was amazing. We actually saw some of their papers come back, and what they were getting for type of feedback was wonderful. And that's something that's really helpful. I mean, if you were an English teacher, it's really nice to have somebody be able to give some kids some feedback prior to you getting to their paper, which is great.
So like in an essay, they wouldn't go through and correct grammar or anything?
Yeah, they're not
Say-
gonna be like, you spelled this wrong, you're missing this, but they might say,
just-
well, you're missing evidence to support this claim that you made, or this is not really a good introduction. How would you hook your audience into reading your paper? Or they might say you might want to reorganize a lot of this stuff that you're doing because it's not having a nice flow to it. But a student can actually upload the assignment. So say the teacher wanted to be very specific and wanted kids to work on something like voice, right? So they could upload the paper and the assignment so that tutor is focusing just in on what skill the teacher is asking of them at that point. So this is not, even with any of the like questions, if they put up a math problem, they're not gonna say, oh, the answer is 22. What they do is they use Socratic seminars to help the kids go through it. So they question the students to get them to get to the answer, right? So it's not just, here's your answer, go for it. And what's interesting is they were telling us, some kids have had like upwards of like 4-hour sessions with a tutor, right? There's no limit. It's not like, oh, you've timed out after 10 minutes, good luck. So they can contact the tutors anytime they want. And what's nice is that the employees are not, and the way they explained it to us, they're not like an Uber driver who's just working on their own. These are their employees. They have to go through criminal background, just like any of our employees have to. So they're not just freelancers that are like, oh, sure, I like math. They have to actually have some skill level in what they're doing. So they are usually subject area experts or high-performing college students, people that have expertise in the area. You're not going to get somebody who just, like I said, oh, I like to read, so maybe I'll help a student. We're only offering this right now for our grade 5 through 12 students so that we can see how many people are really actually accessing this, because we do pay per student for them to use this product. And I don't know, Sarah, if you've been on it or not, or had a chance to do it. I do know that the math department at the middle school level, there was already, this just launched on Monday. I think there was over 100 students that already accessed paper to get some support. So, I mean, not that that's a huge number, but it's a huge number. It's because today's only Tuesday. It just launched yesterday. So they have gone through a whole rigorous background on all of this. These were all the questions. Like I had, honestly, beyond the content piece of it, I was like, who's with the kids? What are they doing? How are they accessing them? Because I didn't want anything crazy out there that we didn't have control over. And then we can look at any transcripts. What's nice about this company too is they said if they feel like they have some concerns about a student, like as the conversation's going back and forth, they will alert us to let us know, right, that they have a concern over a student. So they have a flagging system to say, there was a little interesting conversation that happened here. You might want to check in with so-and-so to let them know, like just to put some eyes on them and find out what's happening. So they do have some social emotional supports built into the whole process. So we also were in alignment with their mission. So what was really nice, obviously, we have our Pride core values, and that this company was based on the fact that they wanted to provide equity to all students to receive support, and for parents. I mean, how many of us have been in a situation where our kids have asked us for some type of help and we don't feel maybe equipped to help them because it's not our content area, we may not understand the assignment. So students can get help from someone that has expertise in that content area. And it's in multiple languages as well, so they're not just gonna be limited to English, which is nice. They have upwards of 4 languages right now, Spanish being one of them, which is predominantly our language here in Chelmsford that students have. So, interesting. So do you have questions before we take a look at a quick little demo of it, if it works?
Have you communicated to students how to access this?
Yep, so it's through our Clever portal, so as students just log in once, like they do for any of their textbooks, iReady, everything under the sun, and they just have to click on to that, and the teachers are putting it up, so principals have been working at the school level, so like we put out kind of like our larger statement, putting it on social media, school has been talking about it with staff. 2 departments out of the gate are gonna put like an extra focus on it, like really look at the dashboard. There is a teacher dashboard, we're not requiring it, but the math department and the L department really wanted to get an idea of how many of their students specifically are doing that. So when the kids log on to Clever, it uploads them, it has their classes. So the teachers know who, like what kind of class they're taking, so it will say Algebra 1 next to it. So it's super helpful that way, and then we could look at the transcripts if we want to. Teachers can use this in their classroom if they were putting kids into group work, if they feel so compelled. They could say, pull up one of the tutors and have them go through what you just did before we come back as a larger class. I don't know if I'd be correcting a paper. I'd be like, don't pass it in to me until you have no yellow marks on it. Now, we were joking around about that, but it is a resource for teachers too. But our primary goal right now is when school is out and someone needs some help, how do students get some help? If teachers would like to use it in the classroom, they are more than welcome to do so.
Is this company in Massachusetts?
They are based out of California.
But they meet the standard of whatever's happening in a particular state?
Yes.
Okay. And the last time I heard the Socratic method was in law school, and I'm actually very good at the Socratic method. The problem is that I don't always know the answers, so I hope they do. That's basically it.
Yeah, so it's just trying to get the kids to think instead of just being like, hey, give me anybody can do that. They can go
Right.
on, I forget the name of that website when we had the speaker, Alan November.
Yes,
Yes. Wolf something. Yeah, kids can go into any website and just
Yeah.
pop in the information and get answers.
Yeah.
This is just having somebody guide them through to have them help get to that answer. So
it's
okay,
good.
yeah, it's, like I said, it's worth looking into, especially where we have some grant funding for it, and we have to provide something for students after school. And I think this will just be like, just another tool, right, to be looking at. And we'll have some numbers as students go through the school year. And so what the principals have asked teachers to do is put it on their Google Classroom page, remind students about it. So just kind of work the PR piece of like, or if you're talking to parents, like, well, they didn't know how to do something, I don't know what to do. Well, have you used any of our paper tutors before? And just getting the word out there, so the more we can get it out there, the more students will have access to it. Little demo? Everybody ready? Crossing my fingers it works. So of course, it has nothing to do with paper. It's just the name of the company. So it's, again, we wanted to provide some more support for students, and we'll be interested as this goes along. I can give you some updates of usage. And if we're seeing usage at certain grade levels or levels in general, and see how it works out.
It's completely free for our students.
It's completely free for us. Our students pay nothing. We have provided the whole thing for our students. We pay for the whole thing.
That's cool service.
Yeah.
Explain how it goes, I'm gonna have to try it.
Yeah, and there's no like time limit either, right? So you can only use it for an hour.
Got some papers you have to turn in for work.
Oh, you want to use it for your, no, your student has to have an account. As you can see, like it's linked, that math class is a student's math class because everything's going through our Clever portal. So, yeah, you'd have to be a student here to be able to
All
use
I'm
it.
saying is one of my students,
Oh,
my children is gonna.
oh, at home, okay,
You can give us an update next meeting.
I'll let you know.
okay. So I'll give you an update of numbers and usage as we go through this process. Like I said, it just launched yesterday.
You had one more slide about just how parents could
I
re-
did, I
register for
got
a
so
webinar
excited.
if they wanted to.
All right, let me go through one more slide. Sorry, nice and loud. Yes, so a couple of things. 24/7, there is a parent information center session that you can sign up for if you'd like to just go on their webinar. And it's in multiple languages, and parents are welcome to contact paper company directly. They have an email that parents can ask questions. And as we get more information, we'll be more than happy to pass that out to parents. We'll keep it up on our website. We'll also keep it in the weekly newsletter as like kind of a running tab, and the links are in that newsletter that people could just click on it and get more information. Glad you remembered I had another.
I'm on.
You
top
are,
of
you
it
are.
yet tonight.
Game on, this is great.
Great. No, thank you very much for sharing that. Moving on, next item this evening, this is the time of year, good night, that we do
Thank you.
our financial reports. So Joanna always prepares a quarterly report for us. So we're just ending the first quarter, which is July, August, and September activity. So this is the first quarterly report that Joanna's prepared. And I'm going to ask her just to walk you through it.
Thank you. So in our packet is a couple-page memo highlighting where we're at with our $65 million operating budget for fiscal year '22, and then the detailed report of all the different DESI categories, a report on the grant and revolving funds through September, and then a few reports on the student activity accounts of the clubs and teams for the high school and each middle school. So at the beginning of this year, overall, we're still pretty favorable. The non-labor accounts, not all the spending really has kicked in gear yet. We're only in October. Some of the labor variances have popped already because we're staffed up with our professional staff. And then special ed tuitions are still favorable. We have most items encumbered, but there could be some students still moving into the district. So that's still a moving number. So the teachers are favorable, that category on pages 5 through 7 by $440,880. One of the line items that we talk about is the lane changes. That category isn't, we already did the budget transfer for the lane changes, people who have achieved a higher degree. And this year, it's only going to remain favorable by $3,195. We talked about that at the last meeting when you approved that budget transfer. The big area where we're going to be favorable is we have this every year when we budget for a vacancy at Master Step 3, and then we hire someone and they come in wherever they are on with their education, with their bachelor's or master's degree or CAGS or doctorate. And then with our transfers, if we have a vacancy and a teacher is at like a Master Step 11, they're going to be, that category for that one line is going to be unfavorable. Overall, when we look at the 400 plus teachers, our estimate right now is that we're going to remain 328,000 favorable for the year with all of the ins and outs. The other factor that would affect this category was be approved unpaid leaves of absences. That's still a moving target as, you know, life changes for people and they decide to take some time off for their family. And I don't have that number quantified yet as we only have a couple approved unpaid leaves right now. We'll be coming back to the committee with suggestions for reallocating that favorable variance as we move through the year.
Could I ask something on this part of it? I just want to understand here. 328,000 is what we anticipate by the end of the year, we'll have an excess in this budget item because in large part, the new teachers that came in had less degree, high level degree than the teacher that exited that position or,
It's the master step 3 is what we budget the vacancies at.
okay, so,
It's not the degree the person has, it's the fact that they don't have the longevity. They haven't been here as long, so they're coming in
Okay.
at a lesser step.
Right, they might
all
be a
right, so
bachelor
it's the
step 1.
experience level.
Yes, it's,
The number of years teaching,
yep.
The number-
Chelmsford.
Experience level, okay,
right,
all right. That's a substantial difference.
right.
Yes.
So overall for the district, I'm just thinking the impact overall for the district in the long term, because of course I'm concerned about that, and we should be as a committee, I think. And, you know, for me, in a sense, it's not a favorable variance. And I'm just thinking long-term, budget-wise, and how we give this back to this group to continue to have the level that we need in the district, because clearly any achievement we have is not only our students, it's also the incredible teachers. It would be important to me to see in a budget going forward, finding ways of giving this back, be it in development, being it in wage, whatever it is, in order to keep that level of teaching ability there going forward, even if the individuals who came in might have less experience. So long-term, what do we do to reinvest this money that we originally thought we would need for teachers and staff and so on to, and reinvest it back into this budget item rather than putting it in somewhere else in the budget?
We have budget items for like continuing education,
Yeah, course
for
reimbursement.
workshops, for, and one of the
diversity
key
training.
things.
Or
Course
diversity training.
reimbursement to get higher degrees.
Right, and when you, I mean, personally, bringing in younger teachers or less experienced teachers, that, I think that can be a positive thing, because they bring an enthusiasm, they have a willingness to learn
New idea.
and new ideas.
Absolutely.
And that was one of the nice
Technological
things back
skills that
in
some
the
of
day
the
when I
older
was
teachers
there, was the meshing of the veterans with the young people.
Wow, that was a
I
shock.
agree.
Well, so I think the only thing is, and I don't want to oversimplify this, but your steps are based on longevity and your lanes are based on levels of education. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I would be more concerned, I think about the lanes than I would be about the longevity, to be perfectly honest with you. If we have someone with a master's who's coming in with a little bit less experience, I would prefer that than someone who's got a bachelor's who's been working on getting their master's for a very long time, but hasn't achieved that yet. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
And I also think it depends on the person. Some people are,
absolutely.
they may still be working on, achieving that degree, but they may be really positive and have a good knowledge of the content material and class management skills and all of these things. And, I don't want to turn away a good candidate if they're in the middle of working on achieving that higher degree, just because, they haven't achieved it yet.
And
Understood.
another reason along those lines is you can have people who are teaching, but they're coaching, they're advising, they are invested in the school. So much extra of their time goes into that they don't necessarily have time to do the coursework.
You have to do it in so many years, and it has to be, it's not unlimited.
Right.
But, there's some people who are further along in the process than others.
Right.
But I guess I would say that the money that we put back into wherever we put it, I think it has been in the service of both our staff and our students, in terms of, like I said, the diversity training, I think has been a big one that we've invested in, as well as, some of the other professional development that we've been able to provide, and especially the course reimbursement is huge for a teacher.
Yep.
Because this really allows them to be able to take courses in areas that they may find helpful for, teaching on a day-to-day basis. I know, use me as an example. I did not get a CAGS because at the point that I had reached my master's, then I just started wanting to take classes in areas that I thought would improve my skill level in the classroom. Does that make sense? I didn't want an administrative license. I wanted to just kind of branch out and try, courses in, special education or ELL and a whole bunch of different things. And having course reimbursement makes it possible for me to be able to do that without facing significant financial burden.
So whatever we can do to make sure that that's available to our staff as the level of experience decreases, I think, is extremely important. I'm not saying, and never would, that, a teacher who has a bachelor's is necessarily not going to be as good as a teacher who has a master's. I just don't believe in that because I agree. There are so many other variables out there. What I'm saying is that I think it's important that we make the money allocated to areas that are important for the different staff that's coming in, the different teacher. There is a difference between somebody who's been in the profession for 5, 6 years, sometimes better, and sometimes worse, than somebody who's in it for 10, 15, 20 years. And they have different needs, and especially generational needs that are quite different. So I think that's important for us as a system to make sure that we are allocating it to that. So it might be that for this generational thing, it would be different courses that talk about, team building, team development, socialization, whatever it is, that would be different from somebody who might have been in the system 15 or 20 years. So just thinking of those.
I mean, what we try to do in a situation like this is anytime we identify like a surplus within our budget, we typically recommend that we invest those monies on one-time type expenditures to not increase the base budget for that following year. And then we basically would be locking in with our staff as it exists today to build next year's budget, right? So it's almost like resets, if you think about it, each year. So we'll reset our staff when we build the fiscal '23 budget, and we'll have, say it's $300,000 of extra money that we're anticipating at the end of the year. When we reach a certain point of the year where we're comfortable that that projection is gonna hold, then we would actually talk about how would we want to invest that $300,000. But again, I've always recommended it be considered a one-time purchase, not to put, say, like another $300,000 into a recurring cost in the budget, because then you're resetting your floor for the following year's budget. And you're almost kind of locking in decisions on staffing before going through the budget process by doing that. But I mean, this will, when it's excess money, whenever we feel comfortable that that projection will hold, we'll bring some recommendations before the committee about how to spend that money. And that's when we can have those conversations on what's really best and timely to do.
Great, thank you.
I don't want to get into too much of the budget, but, based on town meeting last night, we were looking at a possible projection. I say possible because obviously nothing's been decided. 2 million, I think, is what they said last night, right? We've been doing 2 million for the last, how many years now? It's got to be four years, and I mean, in the past, it used to be, I think, significantly more that we would go up. Could be, I don't even have a number, but, but it's been.
Bless you.
It's been 2 million, 2 million, 2 million.
So as a percentage of the budget, it's getting less and less and less.
That's what I'm getting at, thank you. And so I think that, as I was listening to this last night, I was thinking, how much longer can we sustain this, Because I am a little worried about that.
Right.
So I think that, to your point, yes, I think we have to take a look at it, but I'm also taking a look at, like how much longer can we keep this up? Because 2%, 2 million is maybe barely covering our cost of living increases, right?
It's basically covering your fixed costs for the year,
Right,
like your
right.
COLAs, but
Right.
again, that assumes basically staying at about a 2%.
Right. My
increase
concern
each
is that any change in the economy would change that number, and that
Correct.
I worry at that point, what might happen, so.
Well, there are many things happening as a result of COVID that could lead to the substantial need for a lot more.
Right.
And part of it is the number of people that are not returning to the workforce might choose to go to paper instead of going into the school system. You know?
Well, I'm hoping they go work for the bus.
There was a bit of that. There
And
was a
they get
bit of
their
that.
driver's license.
Right, thank you. And while, 328,000 is a significant amount of money, it is a pretty small percentage variance of our overall labor budget. When you look at our labor dollars, I think we did a pretty good job getting it right. The next one is just the same type of category, that more the specialist teachers, which is reading, ELL, and that is also at a favorable point this early in the fiscal year. We're 214,000 favorable, but that category also has that offset for the CHIPS teachers. So we'll make that decision toward the end of the year if we're going to need to make that journal entry, having the CHIPS revolving fund, as we budgeted, help fund some of those CHIPS teachers. A new variance this year is in the employee separation costs. That's for the early retirement incentive benefit that's in the teacher's contract. As you may recall, we had excess favorable variances in last year's budget. So you had approved that we pay those incentive costs that were scheduled for July at the end of June for those teachers. So that crossed the fiscal year, and then that made it possible for fiscal '22 then to be favorable. I'm estimating it to be by $129,792. So that will be in a category for possible reallocation a little later in the year. The next page is special ed out-of-district tuitions. So as you remember, we budget all of this, we record all of the tuitions in the local budget, but in the end, it's funded through the local budget and the circuit breaker fund. We keep everything in the local budget till the end of the year and then do those transfers at the end of the year. We budgeted just special ed tuitions and then the offset to circuit breaker. And we did not budget for any offsets from school choice or a Valley credit or a prepaid tuition last February when we put this all together. Fast forward to now, and we know more. We know what our circuit breaker numbers are because that's come out from DESE. We have learned that Valley is likely going to be giving a credit in the amount of $533,385 to us as a member district. They'll vote on that pretty soon. I think November timeframe, and that number will become more firm. But that's the estimate at this time. And we also did prepay tuitions last year, which we did not think we would be doing when we were putting the budget together. So with those three new pieces of information, this category is going to be favorable. We still need to know, there could be some more special ed tuitions coming that we haven't encumbered yet. Students could still move in, or students may need an out-of-district placement who's already here. So we'll keep an eye on this number, but it could range between, $1 and $2 million, depending on how things go with special ed tuitions this year. Okay. And then the last page is just a reminder of our school choice fund. Even though it's not an offset for special ed tuitions, which is how these were originally coupled, I'm just highlighting our balance in the fund right now is at $2.1 million, and we use this to fund the one-to-one computer initiative. And those leases for those grades is about $136,000. So we estimate that we'll still land at the end of the year at about 2.1 million, and this fund will just sustain that effort. Any questions on the $65 million local budget, how we've done the first quarter, and very early predictions of some favorable variances?
Any questions? Nope. Looks good so far.
Yep. The next report is the grant and revolving funds. That's the one-page summary. So the top part is grants that are multi-year that carry over. So we still have some time to finish implementing those plans. The kind of middle part is the brand-new grants for fiscal '22. So this is showing, ESSER 1, ESSER 2, ESSER 3. The special ed is getting extra funding this year, and then there's some competitive grants that we've been awarded. So it's very early, very little has been spent on those yet, but they're well underway of, starting their plans, and the financial impacts will follow. And then kind of right below that is some of our other funding, our private grants, and the circuit breaker number is in there too. We're sitting at right now, 2.3 million, and then the first quarter payment did not arrive in the first quarter. It actually came in October, so you'll see that revenue come. And then the lower part is all the revolving funds, food service, athletics, transportation. And all of those are, no one's running in a deficit, plenty of reserve balances, and it's very early in the year to project those revenues. But we will not go into deficit on any of the funds.
For the food service, is the government still paying for the program for the
Yes.
year?
Yes.
Okay. Right.
Yep, all breakfast and lunches at no cost to families.
Okay. I just read something in the paper how they're trying to eliminate kids that didn't have money, giving them an alternative. I don't wonder why we're doing that at this point. If the government, was still getting funded from the. So there was some sort of legislation so that in the past, if a kid couldn't afford buy lunch, they'd get a cold lunch instead of a hot lunch type of. And so they're trying to put in legislation so they can't do that. I wonder why that was happening at this point, just because of the fact that everybody should be able to get a hot lunch at this point.
Yeah.
Well, I assumed, but did every state adopt that, or is every state eligible?
Every state is eligible, but you can turn down USDA funding. You don't have to accept it, and then you don't have to accept.
Maybe it was maybe like a pre-pandemic.
Maybe it was something that they started beforehand, yeah.
It had been talked when people had paid.
Yeah.
But it really wouldn't be applicable right now.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any questions on the grants or revolving funds?
Can I, just on the report?
Yep.
Just so I understand.
Sure.
Current ending balance, this means it's what's in the account? The ending balance with remaining revenue?
Are you on the far left or on the far right?
I'm looking on this chart.
The blue column?
The blue column, and then there's a white column, and then there's a light beige column.
All right, so we can start with the first one.
Okay.
Like, up, the very first one is ESSER 1.
Right.
Okay, so it's a fiscal '21 grant, so we're in year 2. It's a multi-year grant. It was $311,545
Okay.
was the award. The receipts is $31,154. That's revenue. That was like the seed money DESI sent. Typically, they send 10% right out the gate to kind of get you
Okay.
going. And then so far, we have spent $10,473 on that grant. Okay? So of the difference between the revenue we've gotten in, the 31,000, and what we've spent, 10,000, we still are we're not in deficit, or we still have that seed money of $20,681.
Okay,
And then through the next year, the remaining revenue is $280,000. I'll draw down from DESI as we spend the money. You kind of got to keep that close.
okay,
You don't want to draw down too much more than you spend. You want it to be kind of spot on. And then, so that's saying this 301 is really what I still need to draw down, the 280, and then I still have that 20,000 of that seed money that they sent us that we really didn't ask for. They just send the 10%. That's available in the fund.
okay. Now I understand. Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions on the balances?
And then the last report is the student activity accounts, the high school and each middle school. So this is the clubs and the sports. So the high school balance at the end of August was $251,099.38. And then you can see all the clubs and teams in detail below that. And the McCarthy School has $21,546.52. And the Parker has $42,244.62. That's a cumulative number.
Any questions on the club accounts, activity accounts? All right, thank you, Jonah.
Yep.
Very much. Okay, next item on the agenda this evening is a initial discussion on the fiscal '23 capital planning that we're going to be starting soon. And one of the, when I was been talking to Dennis, we actually had a bunch of capital projects that we did complete over the course of the summer. We still have a lot that are in pending status, because even if we get funding from town meeting, say in April, and it was a little delayed this year, but whenever we get town funding, we have a very short window during the summer to really do projects. So some of it has to take place during, say, school vacation weeks and things like that. So we're not done everything. But several of the bigger projects I just wanted to share with you that we were able to accomplish and grab some quick pictures for you. So one of the things that we did last year was the complete renovation of the McCarthy Auditorium. So these are just my pictures. We'll do better pictures at a later date. But if you've been in the McCarthy Auditorium, basically, all the seats were removed. The flooring was changed out. We have carpet now just on the walkways where you'd walk. It's a poured floor that's underneath the seats. New color scheme, obviously, but, you know, beautiful new interior of that space. These are just an angle from the front stage right. You also just have an angle from the back. All the lighting is new that you can kind of see up in the ceiling facing the stage. There are speakers towards the front of the auditorium that are all new. So complete new sound, lighting, the whole deal. That is all, that's all in the works. So at this point in time, it's really punch list stuff that's happening over the next couple of weeks. The sound people are coming back out to organize everything with the lighting board in the back of the space, but it's really coming out nice. So we had November 1st as kind of a target date of when that would be reopened. It's going to be within a week or two of that. It's just a matter of really getting the fine tuning done with the sound system and the lights. But that'll be open again for student use as well as rentals and things like that, really in the very, very near future. So that came out very nice. We certainly can go over and take a walk some night too and give you a sense of that. Another project that we were able to finish over the course of the spring and summer, right up before the start of the school year, was a complete remodel of the Parker School kitchen. This also came out very nice. We had an individual work with us on kind of creating a whole theme of the Hungry Lion Cafe theme that came out, so you can see that. We're going to be doing a similar setup. Obviously, it could be different color scheme and different names at McCarthy. That's going to be in the works. But Parker was completed for the start of the school year. Total gut of the space, so everything came out, all new, poured floors, new drop ceilings, new lighting, paint, the whole thing. Even within the kitchen, all new service lines. new, equipment. So you've got a cold case here. The picture on the right is actually a pizza oven. So they have their own little pizza space that they can make pizza and serve out the window. I've tried it. It's very good. It gets very high marks. So that came out really nice. And then in the kitchen again, just a quick picture. All new appliances. So really like a state-of-the-art functioning cooking kitchen, which is great for the Parker. And again, that'll be kind of the model for some of our other schools. Moving forward, at the high school, we had done some renovations to the science pond area over the course of the late spring and summer. John Morris, the coordinator, really wanted to have kind of an observation deck to be able to go out over the water, to be able to take samples and things along those lines. So that space was worked over the summer. There was a lot of overgrowth and cleaning that had to be done to that particular facility, so that all occurred. They did a very nice job of kind of mulching and creating outdoor classroom space. I don't know if you can really see it in the far right. They have nice picnic tables out there now where you can actually kind of go out for a class and whatnot. But that space really came out very nice at the high school. Inside the high school, the gymnasium floor, which has really been in tough shape for some time, got a complete overhaul as well. Changed the logo, changed the color scheme of the floor. It's a nice new poured floor. We went with a multi-tone effect. We actually incorporated in a track on the outer skirts of it for our track teams and practice and whatnot. That's in the far left corner is the auxiliary gym. We kept that a different color pattern so that the main floor kind of stood out from everything else. And on the right, you can kind of get a sense we did a multicolored track that really encompasses the whole space and frames the area very nicely. So that's gotten very good reviews. And Donna was just over there a few minutes ago for a game. It went very well for her. So just a couple of the bigger projects we did over the course of this past year that are either nearing completion or done. So just wanted to have an opportunity to share that with you. As we start to look at fiscal '23 capital planning, which again, the work is beginning now. It'll go now through like January. We are doing some work again with Durham Whittier. They've come back in. One of the asks of them is to help us look at our 10-year capital plan, the different projects we've completed, the ones that are still outstanding, help us kind of reprioritize that. But what I provided for you was basically a listing of the handful of projects that were still in various states of deferral. So we're actually going through the process right now internally to kind of verify whether they were completed at all, because some of the like I certainly know that we didn't do the boiler replacement at the high school, but there were several items that were more kind of like the cleaning of the HVAC, and I believe some of that may have been completed when we did the HVAC work with DPW, but I just want to confirm that before we remove them from the list. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We always kind of track deferred projects on the list. I do that in red for you, just so that you know if something came up in a previous year and you didn't handle it, why it's on there. And then we always go out 5 years. So you actually have in black the projects that, as they're listed today in the original Durham Whittier plan, were earmarked for fiscal '23. So again, internally, like myself and Brian and Gary and Kathleen from the town side with Durham Whittier, over the next week or two, we're actually going to be going through each of those projects to make sure that the work hasn't been completed, it still needs to be completed, the estimate on the costs is relevant. And then we'll come back at the next meeting, probably in November, with a list to tell you what actually was completed and can be removed, what needs to stay on there, and to start the dialogue around prioritization of projects for next year. I believe we're going to stay within the realm of the projects that are here. I don't see us in this first year, just because of timing, really jumping significantly to something, say, in fiscal '27 or '28 and reprioritizing. But we will have some input from Durham Whittier just to make sure that nothing really should jump immediately to the front. But we've really done a good job over the last 4 years of knocking off the projects in order that we have. We have very few that were just kind of deferred. But I just wanted to kind of share those projects with you. If you have some time to kind of just review them, please do so. Several of them are like, say, smaller projects. Like one of the things that we needed to do, and we still need to do at the elementary schools, is they have the old cement stair treads that need to be covered properly with like that rubber coated stair treading. So it's a relatively small number. It's like 14 to 15,000 at a school. technically a capital project is supposed to be over 25, but we would lump those 4 schools together, and it would really be like a $60,000 project. So I'll probably list the stair tread project as a $60,000 project, and we'll have that up, because we wouldn't say, well, we'll do it for one school, but we're not going to do it for the other 3. So when we're going through our prioritization at the next couple of meetings, you'll see the list in a little bit different order. But these are the basic projects that we're going to be talking about. So if you could, just kind of familiarize yourself, ask any questions you want if anything comes up, and just be prepared over the next month or so to kind of have those discussions around which projects we want to put forward. Jeff's our representative again on the capital committee, and like I said, this is what we typically do each year. And we were actually fortunate last year, like speaking to some of the budget items, like at McCarthy, one of the projects that was lingering, that had been deferred for multiple years, was the lecture hall renovation at the school. We were actually able to utilize some of our one-time money to fund that project, which then it can get taken off the town capital list, and it still gets completed. Now, obviously, it's not completed yet, so I don't have pictures to show you, but like that is in progress. And ultimately, it'll be listed as a completed project. It just got completed with our money instead of the town money. But, working all together, we got it done. So that's kind of another example of how some of that one-time stuff does come up and help us. So again, just more really for information purposes, tonight, wanted to share some of the projects that were done and also just give you a sense of what's on the list for the coming year in particular, but even over the next 5.
I was just looking at, I noticed that the tennis courts are still on here. Have we talked to community preservation about, partially funding this project?
Yeah, that came up also with, like several of these projects could potentially have like multiple funding sources.
Okay.
So let me have a follow-up conversation again, just as we're getting ready for this one with Gary on that.
Okay.
'Cause then when we even,
Community preservation.
No, which
CPs.
was the
Oh,
project.
tennis courts.
the tennis renovation at the high school. We even had that conversation with the center school, like the playground that we're going to be doing, as well as there was conceptually some talk about redoing the plateau with like a baseball field and also like a turf field. That potentially would have qualified for a piece of it being through CPC. So that would all come into the equation. So the total project is probably in the $1.2 million frame. A piece might come from town meeting and a piece might come from somewhere else. But I'll lay that out for you when we get together.
Thank you.
And when do we need to have our list done by? Well, like, when does the capital committee start to meet?
I have to send like all of our kind of project information by the end of October to John Souza. And he formulates everything to go out to the capital committee. And then throughout the month of November and December, I forget the day of the week, but typically one day a week, they'll set up individual meetings with each of the departments to review the projects. We're typically the last one that goes forward, so there'll be some date in December. So we'll probably need to vote, we will need to vote certainly by the second meeting in November. But we'll see if we get a sense of where we're going for that first meeting in November, because we'll probably get a date in December. That's typically what's happened.
How does this and planning for these expenditures correlate with when we're going to get some information from this facilities assessment study that we're doing? I'm just thinking, I'm looking at the picture of McCarthy's beautiful auditorium. That looks beautiful. And, under the current thing that we have, it'd be gone. So just thinking about what do we focus on and how does it help us going forward with our plan to get some more money and build another building?
Right.
Or renovate or do updates or upgrades or whatever it is going to be to existing buildings. So when will we have the results of this
The
thing?
Durham Whittier study should be finalized in the January, February timeframe.
Okay,
We're looking for a draft report from them right after the holidays. And then a final report right before February vacation.
okay,
So that's kind of the time frame that we're talking about. And that has multiple components, though. So that has the long-term plan, which would be like, say, a new school building project with the SBA.
right,
But it also has our 10-year capital plan, because we've got to be doing the year-to-year
Right.
kind of maintenance and improvements as we go. But the third component we asked them to do was also, while we're waiting for that big project, are there interim steps that we could be taking with our own facilities to really be using them to the maximum potential that they can? So that was a new kind of
Right.
concept for this year. I don't think any of the money that we're spending at any of the schools is being wasted at this point,
Oh,
because we
absolutely
still
not.
have a
This is not a
generation of
waste.
students, right, that are gonna go through these schools while we're waiting for a new project. So, and I know, like, say, McCarthy was one of the ones that was in discussion for, if we were able to do a new school, could that building be repurposed? You're still talking, like, at the time, 7 to 10 years out, by the time you would get an application approved, you would break ground, you'd build a new school, you'd open it. So, 10 years of students are still gonna have to use that space. We all felt it was a good use of the money to upgrade that auditorium for the time being. The same thing for the cafeteria. It really is in tough shape and needs a renovation similar to Parker. I think that's good money that's being spent for that facility. We could always find ourselves, even 8 to 10 years down the line, if a facility comes offline, if there is equipment that was put into the facility, that could be moved to another facility, like your kitchen equipment and things. If it's still up to speed, we could do that. Obviously, you're not able to move, the physical improvements to the actual base building. But we look at it as if kids and staff are gonna be there for multiple years, you've got to make the space as appealing and educationally useful as you can. So I still think it's a good use of the money. We wouldn't, put good money into like a bad situation.
Any other questions on capital? Getting ready, Jeff? All right.
I enjoy it. It's very well run and everyone's very cooperative and
Great. Last item for me this evening is just the personnel report for the month of September. Again, this is just your listing of, typically at this point of the year, it's your new hires. We don't have, a couple resignations. We don't obviously have any retirements, and we had one assignment change. But it just kind of details the movement of staff throughout the system for you, the ins and the outs, so just you can have a sense of who's coming and going.
Questions on the personnel report? We good? Great. All right, any liaison reports? Anna?
I wanted to mention that South Row had their pumpkin fair on Saturday, and it was very well attended. It was great to see so many families there with their kids. So, and I also went to the Boo Bash.
How was that for you, Donna?
Take my Boo Bash thunder? You can take my Boo
No, I will let you continue on, but it was also very well attended.
Yes, the Boo Bash was a great hit, great success. And I know of all the floats, I actually thought, Mr. Fredette, I thought clearly took it away, but who ended up winning the best setup at the Boo Bash?
I honestly don't know. I don't know who the.
Not you? I thought you won. You had a whole video you posted about it.
It's
Student award,
It's
correct?
very hard to beat me.
I know.
But I almost feel like I'm competing at a different level, so we really should have the award go to someone else.
So for people at home that don't know, they made a haunted bus that you had to walk through. With,
The haunted
Were
bus
you
thing this year.
notified that there was a competition?
No, I was not notified because otherwise they would have lost.
Right, so if we weren't notified that there was a competition, it doesn't seem right that he should declare himself the winner.
I'm just saying. But the Boo Bash was a huge success. Tons of families, tons of kids, all dressed up in costumes. Everybody had a really great time.
They took, in all seriousness, they lucked. The weather
They do
could
nail
not have been better.
Right.
For both events, for South Row and Byram, it was excellent. Good turnout for both as well. And I know Harrington and Parker have the Battle of the Boos coming this Friday night. A lot of good activities. Yeah, there's trunk or treating. A lot of good activities.
Yeah, we get some good community participation too at these events. Chris Ferrera was there with his big flatbed
Big
truck.
Yeah.
And it's great to, to see that we have such good participation from our community members at these events as well.
Yep.
To also see the collaboration among the PTOs, I think is really tremendous. And that's increased quite a bit over the last few years, and it's really a pleasure to see that. For me, McCarthy met. I was not able to attend because it was town meeting last night. But they did meet again, and they have plans. And I would like to thank the Friends of Music for taking all of my cans. They are gone from the shed, and the shed is being filled again. But it's a great thing that people do, and if you want to save your cans and do that, go for it.
Right, they'll actually be meeting this Thursday at the Chelmsford High main conference room, and I know that they are looking for a new president and vice president. So if anybody is interested, in joining or, becoming a member of their executive board, then I would go to that meeting. It's Thursday, the 21st at 6:30 at Chelmsford High.
Jeff?
The Alumni Association met, the Hall of Fame speeches, the whole ceremony is on their website. There's a link on their website. And they're looking for the next Hall of Fame dinner, October 22nd, 2022. So they're gonna do it in the fall, not the spring. And the Boosters Club met, and on November 11th, from 4 to 7 at the establishment, they're going to provide a Veterans Appreciation Dinner for any veteran. I just ask that you go to their website between now and the week before November 11th, just to register so they know how many people will be coming, and the serving will be done by CHS athletes. So it's a really nice thing, and they had run a blood drive the week before, so they do a lot of good work.
CPAC had their first meeting of the year. They had great attendance. I mean, it was virtual, but for the regular meeting, there were 15, 20 people there. Right now, they're operating with an interim board, so they're looking for people to help out there. And then that was followed by a workshop on anxiety by Vanessa Leary, who's a psychologist at the high school. It was excellent. And again, by the time that was over, there were 30 people online. So very well-attended events, so very nice job by them. All right, any other liaison reports? Okay, anybody have any new items? Oh, okay. I just wanted to mention, I know we already approved the minutes from our workshop, but I thought the workshop we had went well. Talked about what makes effective teams. They also talked about the importance of measurable goals. And so to that end, I'd like to try to think about what we'd want to set for goals. I know it's a little late, but we're kind of waiting for this workshop and we're going to put off a little bit. But if you want to start to kind of brainstorm a little bit about what they think would be good goals for us for this year. I know we don't have a new strategic plan to work from, but we do have the old one and as a sort of a framework. So if you want to kind of think about what they think would be some good measurable goals this year, can send it to me. I can kind of throw together a list and maybe we can look at that list next meeting and start to work on setting up some goals. Same
Yeah, I can work with you on that if you want, just because oftentimes they pair and.
Yep.
Yeah, we can do that for the next meeting.
Okay, great. All right, anything else, new items? Okay, anybody get any public comment today? I don't think I did. I'll just double check.
Sure.
I did not.
I don't get anything.
Okay, so that being said, I will take a motion to adjourn.
I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Go Sox.
Go Sox.